terms of one of our entities, which necessitated me to communicate urgently with the Office of the House Chair to request if we can be briefed by the Auditor-General's office on what was then outlined by Mr. Magwetu, the AG, and that was approved. And our apologies to the AG's office for the pressure on such a short notice, but we appreciate that you have come. We will then request Mr. Sakaza to quickly take us through the roll call and other people that are here so that we know who is here. Mr. Sakaza, can you take us through?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to members and good morning to the Ministry. Chair, we've got the members, Honorable Chair, we've got Honorable Ngabane, we've got Honorable Begram, Honorable Mkondo, Honorable Kado, Honorable Ndabe, Honorable Zuma, and Honorable Hermans. I've received, Chair, an apology from Honorable Hinana, who said you're going to join 30 minutes later, 9:30. And I also received another apology from Honorable Nkangwini from the EFF. From the AG, I see Ms. Komape, Chair, and then they will say who else is joining them. From the staff, supporting staff, Chair, we've got myself, Utebuho, the researcher, Usbong Seni, the content advisor, Mr. Mvaba, who's the committee assistant, is also not in today. Apology. We also have Koleba today, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Now, Mr. Nonsele now in the Bonia join and we just joined in, Mr. Nonsele. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sakaza. I do see here there are people who have not, others are saying BP. That thing makes me uncomfortable because I would like to really know who is. I'm not saying people must not join, yes, but at least we must know who are these people outside those of the department. But as you are trying to collect that information from these people, can we check? I see who is, are all entities present, DG? DG?
Good morning, Chairperson and the honorable members. All the entities, Chairperson, are represented here.
Oh, okay. I thought you were also going to table your apology.
Oh yes, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'll be in the meeting up until 10:15, and then I will dash out. There's a meeting that has been called by SIU that starts at 10, and as soon as that meeting finishes, I'll join again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Minister, before the AG starts, because it is them that they are going to start, is there anything that you want to, before we start?
Yeah, let me say something, Chairperson, and greet the honorable members, yourself and honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, the Deputy Minister, the DG, and the officials from the entities, and the media and everybody who's here. Let me thank you for the opportunity, and as usual, the officials will present the details of this COVID procurement matters. However, I have a feeling that honorable members are even more concerned about the findings of the AG regarding COVID-19 benefit payments. But I will not speak on behalf of the AG. But let me just focus on that members will remember that from the very start of the COVID-19 benefit payment processes, especially given the large amounts of the funds involved, that we were aware. But there's something very interesting from Mr. Gerard Pappenfas, the CEO of the National Employers Association of South Africa, on SABC News last night. And I want to quote him when he says, the UIF payments to him have been a success despite the challenges they are facing. The UIF did the impossible by putting in place systems within weeks, what could have taken years to materialize. He also states that the criminals saw the loophole and took the advantage. And according to NIESA survey, in April 2020, 90% of the payments that have been paid to legitimate employers, and they acknowledge that. And he sympathizes, of course, with the UIF, as he believes they've made a huge difference in a very difficult time. And yes, there's still more that needs to be done. The following measures were implemented. As Minister, I said that the UIF needed to strengthen the financial controls. With all social partners at NETLEC, it was agreed that there would be a complete audit of all the payments, what we called follow the money. The follow the money strategy. And of course, the AG has come in, and as much as we were wanting to call the AG, but once the president made the proclamation, the AG had to take over. But I was assured that controls were in place. Indeed, this committee was given the same assurance. I remember with the DG, we used to sit with the whole management and their technical people until midnight at the compensation fund building, talking about these controls. And I received that further assurance when the first charges and court cases for fraudulent cases came from the findings of the UIF's own risk management unit. Then came the Auditor-General's finding, pointing to numerous gaps, risks, and inadequate controls and verification processes. This has resulted in illegal payments, amongst others, to recipients of other state grants, students receiving NSFAS payment, public servants, and even inmates, deceased persons, and minors. There is some evidence which still has to be tested also of overpayments and underpayments, as well as inflated claims. And you can see that we're not just talking about officials here. We're also talking about companies. I received an advance briefing from the AG indicating the broad findings of the audit. And I was shocked and disappointed. However, the AG also provided recommendations for the way forward. And the AG recommended that the UIF and the department collaborate with other state organs and law enforcement to investigate every illegal action and risk identified. And we implemented that immediately, even before there was an official pronouncement by the AG, and they did that through their meeting which they had with us, with the commissioner, the DG, and myself. Then on the 24th of August, because I asked them, can I start continuing whilst we have not publicly gone with this report? And obviously, this report will leak. Some people will leak it. Well, they assured me from their side it won't happen. But they said the issues have to be attended with immediate effect. So on the 24th August, The SIU launched this rapid forensic audit into the AG's finding on the UIF with a view of recovering monies illegally and charging the perpetrators. And the department and UIF have worked through the Fusion Center with other government department agencies and the databases to close the gap and eliminate the risks. What is the Fusion Center is a combination of the law enforcement agents, which is intended to speed up investigations and prosecutions of COVID-19 related fraud and corruption cases. And the UIF cases then are handled at the Fusion Center and they are dealt with speedily. Even those which were discovered ourselves, they've gone there. In addition, we've requested the National Treasury to deploy the technical resources to the UIF to urgently implement all the recommendations of the AG and to develop the system solutions to identify gaps and risks. In addition, the National Treasury is also assisting the DG of the department to identify service providers to conduct the forensic investigation into the overall workings of the UIF. Proactively, we are also looking at the workings, looking into the workings of the compensation fund. And I must declare this, Chairperson. We've always been concerned about the very structure of those two institutions.
Sorry, Minister. Sorry, Minister. Can Honorable Hermans mute, please?
Okay.
Was the sound, please?
Ukade ungekho ma-Hermans sikukhumbula ngoku ufikile awumute. Okay, so ilibele le nto isebenza njani. Okay, I've always been concerned about the very structure of those, concerned about their business models, the systems, the IT systems in particular, but also the skills and capacity. When we were starting that project in March, came COVID, and we had to focus everything to COVID now and put that project aside of the fundamental restructuring. And there was no way that would start with any restructuring during that. But that does not justify the issue of the basic controls which people who are employed were supposed to put. Well, some 38 court cases have been opened and charges laid against perpetrators, drawing on the evidence from the AG's findings, as well as from suspicious transactions which were picked up, of course, by our own risk management unit. And some of these cases are already before the courts, and some perpetrators in jail or out of bail, and more cases are to come. On the morning of the public release, that does not just the AG's findings together with the DG. The senior management of the UIF was cautionary, allowing the SIU to pursue its investigation, including the AG, which is helping us on the issues the SIU cannot be able to deal with. And I must indicate that it took us a week consulting with the legal people, because you know our legislation. You don't have any instant suspension. You must give people a chance to represent themselves, ask why this happened. The rule of the audi alterim patem is very important. Shop stewards, they know that rule, that before you do anything, you hear the other side. And of course, we had to take a lot of illegal advice before we could just act. Let me assure this committee, this is not the end of the matter. A complete audit of the COVID-19 TERS benefits payments has agreed with all social partners at NETLEC. It's going on. It commences, and where we follow the money, beyond that, the AG will have a second bite in terms of the other audits of the annual audits or the annual statutory audits of 2021, and I think for the remainder of the other months. And by the way, Chairperson, NETLEC agreed to extend COVID-19 to September 15th. And we are dealing with that. Our actuaries have confirmed the affordability, and the board has also approved it. And I've been dealing with that matter as the executive authority. And thank you again for the opportunity. Not good news, but I hope I've been able to provide the committee with some reassurance that with the assistance of the other organs of the state, and that was the major recommendation of the AG, we have thus far responded appropriately to AG's findings. But it was not the recommendation of the AG to suspend. No, they do not pronounce on that. They just give us the findings and say, your books are looking like this. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Minister. Not good news indeed, but we can't be expecting everything nice all the time. We'll hand over to, without wasting time, we'll hand over to the Office of the Auditor-General to take us through. And yeah, thank you very much. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson.
Before you start, I just want to put the rules. Please, members, our guests, they must please mute so that we are not disturbed, and would like to see your picture. And all of us, we must close our videos so that we don't disturb or interfere because of the network with the presentation. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. The Minister, together with the honourable members, thank you for an opportunity to engage with you on the report that was tabled by the AG this Wednesday. I think the Minister had went at length giving the background to our exercise, so I would not repeat some of the elements that he already covered. But yes, our audit was responding to the request from the President for us to support government in already performing the audit earlier and indicating the areas that require at least the controls to be strengthened further. To that effect, we would have looked at the UIF, and we would have covered particularly iteration 1 and iteration 2, with the intention of having the second report that will then cover the rest of the iterations and the periods that are yet to take place. So in our report, Chairperson, we have about 3 categories in the main. We have observations that we made that talks to the preventative controls that we would have loved to see happening in the environment. We have the second category where we deployed our data analytics in attempting to compare different databases within government, just so that we can determine whether some of these payments were all legitimate or not. In the last part, we also highlighted a bit of supply chain in particular, and we also highlighted the additional risks that we are recommending the department and the fund to look further into, in just making sure that you strengthen your control environment and you prevent the deficiencies that could manifest themselves in that space. From the audit experience itself, we would have engaged with the management of the UIF, would have engaged with the DG. We also took a bit of time to engage the Minister and the board accordingly. We did get support right from the management of the UIF up until the Minister and the board in terms of the audit itself. To that effect, we had recommended as well the primary controls that we believe that will be able to assist the fund as they continue on this process. As the office, we identify that this is one of the significant interventions from government, and appreciating the support that government had made available to the workers in particular that would have been affected by the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. Chairperson, if you could allow me, I wanted to ask Nana. Nana Sikwati is the senior manager overseeing the UIF. I also have Mr. Pule Luvumbi, who's also the senior manager from our IT system joining. So if you could allow me to have Nana to take us through the presentation. The report is publicly available, but we are tempted to just summarize some of the key matters in the report in the form of a presentation so that we can assist the members as they digest the contents of the report itself. With your permission, Chairperson, I wanted to give Nana the stage. Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much. Is Nana going to be able to will be shared on the screens, on our screens, the report?
Definitely, Chairperson.
Okay, over to her, please.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Nana.
Thank you so much, PA. Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, honorable members, and to the Minister as well. If you'll allow me, Chairperson, to then switch off my camera. I'm the Senior Manager responsible for the audit of the UIF from the Auditor-General of South Africa's office. I will then share my screen if you can allow me 2 seconds to just project it and take you through the presentation. Thank you. Can I just get confirmation that my screen is visible to the members?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
It is.
Thank you so much. I will then continue to my presentation. On behalf of the Auditor-General of South Africa, we have a constitutional mandate as the Supreme Audit Institution of South Africa to strengthen our country's democracy by enabling oversight, accountability, and governance in the public sector through auditing and thereby building public confidence. This is the mission of which our office stands by in order to ensure that the oversight bodies such as yourself, the Portfolio Committee, is able to conduct oversight over the work that we would have conducted as an office and the responsibility that we would have executed in terms of the PAA. The vision of the office is to ensure that we are recognized by all our stakeholders as a relevant Supreme Audit institution that enhances public sector accountability. And this already is the purpose of which we are tabling the report today as the real-time audit that was performed in regards to the TERS benefit claims at the UIF. A bit of background with regards to the special audit that was conducted for the TERS benefit claims, specifically for the UIF, was as a result of the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic, which resulted in a lot of citizens within the country not being able to perform their duties or execute their work, and thereby affected their income at the end of the day. The audit was a unique one in that it was a real-time audit, and the audit was not one that we would have waited until the end of the financial year in order to report on the activities that the fund would have embarked on. And therefore, it highlights the importance of the preventative controls that we have communicated to the accounting officer and authority to address based on the increased risks and significant changes that they had to implement within their operations. And such controls, by their nature, are deterrent to the abuse within the systems themselves. We therefore audited payments, procurement, around procurement and contract management as well as the delivery that they occurred, and are reporting any findings to the accounting officer authority in order to enable us to deal with any shortcomings immediately and tighten the controls to prevent reoccurrence. And this is the objective of the real-time audit, and we're hoping that the presentation today and the observations that we'll be sharing with the committee will then enable management to then go back and look at the processes and therefore enhance the controls in order to limit the loss or the risk in terms of financial loss for the fund. The COVID-19 audit was performed with a multidisciplinary team made up of fraud, information technology, and sector-specific experts who supported the financial auditors to dig deeper and to provide relevant insights in terms of the auditee's risk and operations. And you will see as I go on with the presentation and we look at the focus areas, you will realize in the areas that we're going to highlight some of the expertise that we would have used in order to identify some of the observations that we'll be discussing. and therefore is also part of the special audit. We are currently in the process of auditing those transactions that will be included in the financial statements for the 2021 financial year, as well as the controls implemented to prevent any fraud, misuse, or non-compliance in this regard. So the focus areas was primarily just on the TERS benefit claims, as well as compliance when it comes in relation to procurement and contract management. The purpose of this presentation today is just for us to say some of the observations based on the special audit that will be conducted at the UIF. In the next slide, we were just sharing some of the key elements that would have been shared as well within the special report that was tabled by the AG on Wednesday. We looked at the financial matters with regards to the fund itself. And as at the 31st of July, the fund had paid over 37.7 billion worth of TERS benefit claims. And in terms of the audit experience, this process was started around May 2020, where we engaged management and the accounting authority as well with respect to the special audit that will be conducted based on the President's pronouncement that the Auditor-General be involved in the real-time audit in order to identify some of these control deficiencies. Some of the challenges that we experienced in commencement of this audit was the complex operational environment in which the fund operates, which was continuously changing. And this would be also supported by the various gazettes that had to be issued during this time period as well in order to address the payment for the TERS benefit, particularly with regards to the COVID-19 intervention that was pronounced. Secondly, was also the uniform understanding around some of the aspects of the business operations, as mostly the fund as it operates under normal circumstances as an insurance was also affected by some of the gazettes that would have been issued where citizens that had lost employment as well, but were not previously insured with the fund, would have then also qualified to be paid out the TERS benefit for this COVID-19. Also, again, limited availability of staff during operational hours. I think this is the new normal under which we're all operating, which was a bit difficult to conduct the audit under these circumstances due to limited unavailability in order to comply with some of the regulations that would have been issued by the Department of Employment and Labour in order to ensure that we manage the spread of the coronavirus. In some instances, we did have challenges in the beginning in terms of accessing the data from the fund, as we had direct access to the data in order for us to perform some of the data analytics procedures that we would have performed and some of the observations that we'll be sharing with the committee today as well. We are continuously engaging, like the BE also indicated in the opening, with the accounting officer, accounting authority, as well as the minister. We have shared the observations that we'll be tabling today in order to address or to discuss some of the internal control deficiencies that we would have picked up in hoping that management will then be able to enhance the processes within the fund in order to come up with preventative controls. The third element of the slide then focuses on the financial viability of the fund. Here we would have looked at the investments, taking into account that the fund was actually paying out these TERS benefits from its own reserves, as well as investments that they would have held through the PIC, and in order to make payments to the citizens of the country. The last part covers the scope of the audit, which would have been the control environment, primarily around the receiving and payment of the TERS benefit claim. The focus areas, in summary, that we'll be reporting our observations on in the presentation is around internal control environment, data analytics, the fraud risk elements, as well as the employer site visits. If I start with the key observations around the internal control environment, where we are emphasizing on the preventative controls, if I look at the first observation that we identified is that, firstly, it is important to also acknowledge that the fund implemented a new system or a new model or portal in order to aid the processing of the TERS claims. And this process was found to have some control weaknesses, which we have highlighted as follows. The lack of verification of applicant representing the employers. In this instance, what we identified is that the system did not prohibit a single applicant from representing and submitting claims on behalf of multiple employers or bargaining councils. The UIF does not corroborate whether these representatives are fully duly authorized to represent the employers or bargaining councils that they purport to be representing. There were also no appropriate system validations of the input data submitted by the employers or bargaining councils as the basis of claims payment to prevent the processing of non-eligible and invalid claims. And in these instances, we're recommending to the fund that management goes and implement controls to verify those applicants that would be representing multiple employers to ensure that they are duly authorized to represent the various employers which they prefer to be representing. If I look at the observation number 2, we have incorrect system calculations of the TERS benefit payment for the first lockdown period. This would be the first iteration, which mainly affects payments for the month of April. These payments included days between the 27th of March, when the lockdown actually commenced, up until the 30th of April 2020, where the system did not use a standard system lockdown period of 35 days to calculate the benefit amount, even though the employers indicated an inactivity which was less than the 35 days. This would have been the shutdown period that would have been disclosed by the applicant when making an application with the fund. As a result, the UIF did make overpayments for some of the claims that were processed during this period. If I go to the third observation that we have in terms of the system as well, is the inadequate verification of employer details. In this instance, what we identified is that the UIF only used the UIF reference number to verify the registration status of the employers. However, this poses a high risk for the fund itself with regards to manipulation of the application process, as the UIF reference number on its own could be used across multiple individuals. However, what we're recommending is that other unique details, such as the employer's company's registration number, telephone number, email address, further be used to verify or authenticate the employer or bargaining council that is making an application. In this fourth observation, what we observed is that there was inadequate system functionality for bank confirmation of uploaded documents. In this instances, applicants are required to submit a manual bank confirmation when making application with the fund. However, this bank confirmation was subsequently in the payment phase of the process not used to verify whether or not that particular bank account which is going to be paid actually belongs to that particular employee. And therefore, this was seen as a control weakness, as the bank confirmation is actually submitted, however not used in the verification come the payment phase of the process. If I go on to the next observation, still on the preventative controls, is the lack of consideration of salary portion paid by employer in calculation of the payout for the first lockdown period. Again, this also affects the first iteration, which is the April payments. The system verifications for the calculation of the lockdown period for the first lockdown period, which is the 27th of March, like I said, to the 30th of April, was observed to be incorrect, in the instance being that the portion of the salary that was paid by the employer was not taken into account in reducing the amount to be paid by the UIF as a benefit to the employee. So in this instance, what would have happened is that as an applicant is applying on behalf of their respective employees, they would then declare a portion of the salary that they would have paid to the particular employee. However, when the calculation for the TERS benefit claim is calculated, in order to get to the amount due to the respective employees, this salary portion was not taken into account. Lack of verification of employee salaries. If I look at observation number 6, the lack of verification of employee salaries submitted during the benefit claims. What we identified in this instance is that the fund was not verifying the salaries of the particular employees for which the respective applicants would be applying for in the fund. So based on information that could also previously be available for individuals that were previously insured with the fund, the salary data is available on the fund system. However, when making application for the TERS benefit specifically, there was no verification of the salary amount for the particular applicants, for the particular beneficiaries. If I go to the next focus area, the next observations that I'll be discussing are latex observations. So here what we did is that we analyzed the TERS payments which were made by the fund to the various employers, bargaining councils, or to the respective employees themselves. Also looking at the various existing databases around various government institutions such as your Home Affairs, your South African Revenue Services, as well as the CIPC, in order to confirm the eligibility of the beneficiaries and also identify instances where individuals would have claimed from various government institutions and thereby benefited from the fund as well as the other institutions. And some of the observations, as I unpack and go through the observations, I will give then detail to some of the observations that we made by doing these comparisons using our data analytics. If I look at observation number 7, we identified applicants that are below the legal employment age of 15 years. And in this instance, we noted that the fund had made payments amounting to 224,677 for 53 applications where minors were paid. If I look at observation number 8, an identity number, same as that of a UIF employee, was identified to have received a payment of 4,027 Rand in terms of the TERS benefit claim. If I look at observation number 9, we identified deceased individuals that were paid the TERS benefit claim, and the amount that was paid to these particular beneficiaries was 144,000 rands. And again, like I said, when we're performing the data analytics verification processes, we looked at the databases across various government institutions, and in this instance, in order to validate the ID numbers of the beneficiaries that would have been identified as being deceased, this was as per the Department of Home Affairs database. If I look at observation number 10, individuals who were imprisoned were also identified to have received the TERS benefit, and a total amount of 169,900 was paid to individuals that, according to the Department of Correctional Services database, these people at the time of receiving the payment, according to the information on the UIF system, these individuals were actually incarcerated at the time of receiving the TERS benefit payment. If I then look at the next observation, which is observation number 11, individuals with invalid identity numbers were also identified, and in this instance, we identified 4,161 payments amounting to 13 million odd, which were made to individuals with invalid ID numbers as per the Department of Home Affairs database as well. If I look at observation number 12, we identified payments to foreign nationals. In this instance, there were payments that were made by the fund to foreign nationals amounting to 685 million odd, were for 166 applicants in relation to the TERS benefit that had not, for which the employers had not paid contributions for them for the past 12 months, according to the information on the fund's records. The UIF did not confirm whether or not these non-South African citizens were possibly refugees or had valid work permits. If I go on to the next observation, this is where I was also then emphasizing on the comparison between the database that is sitting at the UIF and what we would have identified from other databases within the government sphere, is that the UIF paid a total amount of 140 million to 35,043 applicants who received benefit from other state institutions, including remuneration in some instances. The first one indicates we identified NAFSA students that received stipends, but also received the TERS benefit claims from the fund amounting to an odd 10 million Rand. We also identified beneficiaries from the SANDF who received payments worth 327,638 Rands. We also identified employees who were paid through PESEL, which is the government employees, that were paid TERS benefit amounting to 41 million odd. We also identified recipients of the disability grant from SASSA who were paid an amount of 69,419 Rand. We also identified recipients that received the old age pension grant from SASSA as well, who were paid an amount of 88 million Rand odd. If I look at observation number 14, banking details, same as those of UIF employees. So in this instance, based on the information on the system, we identified that there were 4 applications which were paid, however, sharing the same banking details as a UIF employee. And the total amount for those benefit claims amounted to 14,614. If I go on, still on the data analytics, we also still identified individuals sharing banking details. Here we identified 12 individuals that were sharing the same banking details that were paid a total amount of 53,971. If I look at observation number 16, double dipping within the UIF. So in this instance, you will know that the UIF is also continuing to pay normal benefits, which would be your maternity, either death, illness, in terms of the UI Act. And in this instance, what we identified is that there were some individuals who were still receiving benefits in terms of the normal benefits from the fund, but at the same time also claimed for TERS benefit from the fund. And the total amount that was paid in relation to the TERS benefit claim in this regard was 14 million odd for those particular individuals. If I then move on to the next findings on the data analytics again, it's payments above the maximum threshold. So here we further analyze some of the payments to the beneficiaries in order to determine whether or not the amount that is due to the beneficiaries was actually paid as due to the respective beneficiaries. And what we observed is that the TERS claims that were paid in excess of the claim amount that is due to the particular beneficiaries, which resulted in overpayments by the fund, amounted to 84 million odd, and it's around 1,183 applicants. Observation number 18 speaks to the UIF overpayments as well, where the UIF used the incorrect number of days to calculate payments, and this affected 723 applications amounting to 10 million. This also talks to the internal control deficiency finding that I would have discussed earlier in terms of the observations that was made in terms of the first iteration. If I then go to observation number 19, still on the data analytics, it's around underpayment. And in this instance, we identified that there were some claimants that were paid less than the claims amount due based on the information on the system. And the total for the underpayments was 250 million odd, affecting 1,700 applications. Observation number 20 speaks to duplicate payments, where an employer was paid 3 times for the same application, and a total amount of 456 was paid in this regard. If I go on to observation number 21, we have unsubstantiated payments made. So in this instance, what we would have done is that we looked at the system information in terms of the application system, which is the web portal, and we also did a reconciliation between the payment system, which is a different system within the UIF, which is used to make payments. And in this instance, what we identified is that there were transactions in the application system, in the payment system, which could not be reconciled back to the application system. So basically what we're saying in this instance is that there were transactions that were processed in the payment system that we could not link back to an application, and the amount totaled 483,000, affecting 7 applications. If I go on to observation number 22, unsubstantiated applications made. Again, it's the same reconciliation process that was performed, but in this instance, what we identified is that there were transactions on the application system with no invoice numbers that would have been generated on the payment system, and the amount for this is the 1.3 billion odd, affecting 235,710 applications. Last observation on the data analytics is with regards to claims with an application date after the payment date. A total of 15,297 transactions amounting to 28 million odd was paid. However, when looking at the system information that we had access to, we noted that the application date for the TERS application was after the payment date of the claim. And if I look at all the observations that we had on the data analytics, we are recommending that management should reconcile these transactions which are paid to the applicants affected, and also scrutinize the entire population of payments made to date to identify the extent of overpayments and recoup funds from affected employers and employees. And further enhancements should be done to the system in terms of the control activities that would have been built into the system in order to avoid reoccurrence of these findings, specifically relating to the data analytics. If I move on to the next focus area, we're looking at procurement and contract management. So in this instance, we would have reviewed the appointment of service providers, which were appointed through deviations to assist with the campaign to create awareness of the UIF Covid-19 TERS initiative. And the three observations that we noted from this process is that there was non-compliance with the instruction note. In this instance, what our observation and based on the audit that was conducted is that when securing media houses to assist with the awareness campaign, the service providers were procured as sole service providers. However, the UIF did not provide evidence to justify the selected service providers as sole providers. If you look at the second observations, there were discrepancies relating to the appointment of service providers, and in some instances, the specifications that had not been a requirement in the approved bid specifications were used to motivate the appointment of a service provider to the bid adjudication. And the last observation in terms of procurement and contract management relates to the unfair awarding of a contract, where a contract was awarded to a service provider that achieved the second position in terms of price and preference points. This is in contravention of the PFMA, as we have highlighted. And the recommendation that we are making in terms of the SCM observations is that management should improve the control environment for the prevention and detection of non-compliance with laws and regulations. And furthermore, that the reasons used for appointing a service provider as a sole provider should be clear prior to approval of the award and be justified. And furthermore, that the specifications are also transparent and that the criteria for evaluation of functionality is clear and known to each service provider, and that when assessing and making the point allocations, that is used consistently in terms of the approved specifications and so on. And lastly, that all payments relating to the above awards after further investigation from management, that it be disclosed as irregular expenditure for non-compliance with the SCM scripts, SCM prescripts as indicated above. If I move on then to the fourth focus area, we have risks and control deficiencies which were identified, and this mainly arises from the fraud risk elements that we would have identified during the process of gaining an understanding of the operations of the UIF in terms of how the business process or the operations are aligned in terms of implementation within the fund. And based on that process, we looked at both the manual process, which would have been in place for the first 2 weeks before the fund actually went live with the web portal in mid-April. So around the manual process that we speak about, this is between the periods of the 27th of March when the lockdown commenced and the fund started receiving payments up until mid-April before the system, the web portal went live, is that there was a lack of independent review or reconciliation performed to ensure that all applications received through the dedicated mailbox from employers and or bargaining councils were dealt with appropriately, and that none of the emails received were deleted or therefore not attended for. In other words, no clear controls further also identified that there was no controls in place to ensure that the employee details per the CSV files or the spreadsheets that are submitted by the applicants, which would be the employers or the bargaining councils, regarding the payroll information of the employees that they are claiming on behalf of, were not amended by either the UIF employees during the application or evaluation process. And this is primarily as a result of the fact that these files that are submitted by the respective applicants are actually editable. The last observation is that the lack of segregation of duties with regard to the process of allocation of claims for preliminary checks and subsequent review, as the supervisor received and distributed the email applications and therefore also reviewed them in the same process. So this is the observations that we made around the manual application process. If I look at observation number 28, we also identified that in terms of the manual and the online application, there is a fraud risk element in terms of the fact that the fund is not verifying the salaries of the employees for which their employers or bargaining councils would have declared when making an application for TERS benefit with the fund. So this is also one that is also impacting on some of the observations that I would have discussed earlier around the validations in terms of the salaries, because you will understand that the salary is a critical component, is actually the key component used to calculate the benefit that will be ultimately be paid to the respective beneficiaries. And in this instance, we made a recommendation to management to consider these fraud risks and the related control weaknesses and develop a response for each in order to improve the control environment and therefore ensure that they have the preventative controls in place going forward that will then prevent future financial loss for the fund. If I then move on to the last focus area is in terms of the employer visits. So we started a process as well to visit the premises of some of the employers and bargaining councils in order to obtain assurance regarding the validity and existence of some of these employees that they would have claimed on behalf of for the TERS benefit payments that they would have received from the fund in relation to the COVID-19 TERS benefit. The audit also entails verifying whether TERS benefits were paid to the legitimate beneficiaries. And to date, various site visits we're still in progress on, and we'll be reporting it as part of the special report that will be tabled towards the end of November. But however, the provinces that had been visited and some of the verifications, like I've indicated, had been in progress at the time of tabling this report, is Gauteng, Northwest, and Western Cape. And some of the two key observations that we identified when commencing with this process is that auditors in some instances were denied entry to the premises, and the officials at the various companies indicated that they were not sufficiently prepared to accommodate and assist the auditors and provide the required information, which would have been the information that they submitted at the time of making application with the fund and actually subsequently receiving the payments for those respective iterations. In another event, it was also identified upon arrival at the address that was provided to the fund when making an application for their respective employees that the premises of the employer were actually deserted, and hence the audit could not be conducted or performed for that particular employer. And the recommendations that we're making to the fund, it is that it is very important that we verify the legal status of these various companies and activities of these companies, further to also determine whether or not these companies are still operational that are claiming from the fund and therefore not liquidated or dormant. And also further to verify the contribution status of the companies from the date of registration, and also recover all outstanding contributions if the companies found to be non-compliant, as this is a requirement for companies to register and ensure their employees in terms of the UI Act. And therefore, the fund does have a legal jurisdiction to follow up and ensure and enforce compliance by these respective employers in terms of ensuring their employees. Furthermore, to institute investigation and legal action to recoup all the monies paid for the COVID-19 TERS benefit, depending on the outcome of the investigation. Thank you, Chair. I think I've gone to the end of my presentation. However, in terms of the observations as well that we have discussed now, I think it's very important to also maybe indicate that in some instances, based on the engagements that we would have had with management, with the accounting authority, which is the DG of Labour as well as through the engagements with the minister as well, management did also make a commitment that they already started the process of implementing some of the preventative controls that we would have recommended. And in some instances, there are still processes in identifying or further investigating some of the observations that we would have communicated. And this we will then be following up on and reporting on these matters again for the special report that will be tabled at the end of November. I will then end my presentation here and hand over to you, Ben. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ma'am. I think you have put us in a situation and environment that now we are more clearer, because it's exactly what we wanted to have an understanding of the extent and the challenges within the fund. Can I request Loiso to mute? Because if he is not muting, I will request him to, because we don't want to be disturbed. I don't know who's Luyolo. Mr. Sakaza, can you check this Luyolo? If he is not muting, I will order that he or she be taken out. Honorable members.
I'm checking, Chair. Okay, I'm checking.
Honorable members, there is the presentation by the Office of the Auditor-General of SA. And I'm of the understanding, therefore, that we are all exposed to this for the first time. But the office thought that it's important for members to get the full picture, because we've always been concerned as the office and in fact as the committee on the situation of UIF in all fronts. either companies, beneficiaries, and whoever that has been. And we want to thank the President for the proclamation that he has made, which is also going to assist us to be able to conduct our oversight in a manner that is more informed. Can I just get some comments and clarities, but with the understanding that the AG's office is saying they are still continuing, and which will then be until November. But this is the information that was to make us to be aware. Can I get any comments from members?
Thank you.
Michael Carter.
It's honorable. It's honorable Bagram, honorable Kado, honorable Dana,
Honorable Dabi.
Honorable Mkondo is also raising his hand. Honorable Mkondo.
it's honorable Bagram, it's honorable Kado, it's honorable Dana, it's honorable Mkondo, honorable Ndabe. Did I hear your voice?
Yes.
Honorable Ndabe.
And Herman's chair, please.
Honorable Hermans. Thank you then start Honorable Bagram. Honorable Nonsele. Honorable Bagram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may go ahead, thank you very much to the report from the AG. It's greatly appreciated. It's something that has been long wanting with this particular fund, so thank you very much for that. Do you think that there is now room for the SIU to come in and investigate certain individuals within the management of the fund? Did you find any personal, from any of the staff, any personal problems that gave rise to the fraud that we're seeing in existence over there? And then other thing is, I've got the report, I'm trying to digest it. I've not had a full chance yet, but would you be available if we wrote to you to answer certain questions? Let me know, thank you.
Honorable Kado.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not going to put on my video because my internet connection is unstable. I've got two questions apiece for the Minister and for the Auditor-General's office. Firstly, for the Minister, how long will the UIF Commissioner, the Chief Financial Officer and the Chief Operating Officer and Head of Supply Chain Management be suspended for? Will that be until November when the AG completes the investigation and report? Secondly, why was SARS not given the task of processing TERS claims and making payments from the very beginning? We know that its IT systems and its financial controls appear to be much stronger than those of the UIF. And I do wonder whether there would have been so much fraud and financial irregularity if SARS had administered the TERS scheme from the very beginning. I wonder whether the Minister could comment on that. Coming on to the Auditor-General, on observation 13 of your presentation, you note that the UIF paid 140 million rand to 35,000 applicants who received benefits from other state institutions, including government employees paid through the personal system who were paid TERS benefit claims of 41 million rand. What is being done to reclaim this money from public servants? Your slide mentions recommendations and planned action steps around SASSA beneficiaries and NISFAS beneficiaries, but you don't say anything about double dipping by public servants. What consequences are there going to be for public servants who have drawn their full salary and still got TERS money too? And then finally, on your observation 11, over 30 million rand was paid to people with invalid identity numbers. What does that actually mean? Are these non-existent ID numbers, or are there ID numbers that have existed in the past but belong to people who are now deceased? And what does it say about the state systems identify its citizens? I mean, surely that's fairly fundamental and elementary, and it has enormous implications for public policy. It goes way beyond the UIF. I mean, it makes fairness and accountability impossible in everything from housing allocation to the distribution of social grants if you haven't got a handle on the authenticity of identity numbers. So what does the Auditor-General recommend in this regard? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Dana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, and morning to the Minister and the Deputy Minister and the AG's office as well. I just have a few questions. Some of them have been partially covered by the...
We are not here, Chair. We are not here.
Honorable Dana, you are very much soft. What's happening? They can't hear you.
I apologize. My signal is quite bad due to load shedding. Can you hear me now?
I think you're much better. Can we hear?
Okay, can I continue, Chair?
Continue, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Are the investigations being done into other staff of the UIF, except for those who have been suspended with regards to irregularities uncovered by the AG? I understand that the investigation is still ongoing, but I'd like to know if that is being looked into. And with regards to the temporary suspension of the Commissioner and the CFO, the Head of Supply Management, etc., what exactly does the process going forward with regards to disciplinary steps entail? For example, timelines, etc. We see that many suspensions pending investigations tend to pend for months, even years on end, which is not fair to either the employees or the institution. So I'd like to know what the process is there. And then also companies who received double payments, for instance, how much was paid out in double payments in this way, and has it all been paid back? If not, how much has been paid back and what is being done to get those funds back? And with regards to such as Home Affairs, SASSA, NSFAS, etc., what government databases are being compared with the UIF's database to ensure now that problems like what we've seen through the AG's investigation do not occur again? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mkonto. Honorable Mkonto.
Thanks. Thanks, Chair, for the opportunity. Good morning to you, honorable members, the Minister and his team, and our guests. Chair, the system under review during this meeting was established on emergency basis. But looking at the report that we got today, it seems some individuals, instead of identifying the loopholes and weaknesses of the system and enhance it or assist in enhancing it, they decided to engage on fraudulent activities. The Minister talked about cases that are already opened. Can we see convictions? I understand he said there are some on bail, some are arrested, and so forth and so forth. Minister, can we see convictions, please? Because there is a lot of wrong that has been done here. And then I don't get the sense of the contribution of the internal audit unit in all the presentations that have already been put before the committee. Because I don't know, but I thought the internal audit unit of the department had a role to play in enhancing the system and even in identifying risks that might have been in the system and assist the department to mitigate those risks. The other point is, I can't remember the slide, but there is where Unana said there are people who were underpaid. As we are talking about recovering the funds of those who benefited fraudulently, can those who were underpaid be paid back the outstanding funds? And lastly, as we are going around with this matter, Chairperson, there are people, employees that were employed through labor brokers. In all the presentations, I don't get a sense of what has happened to them. Is there any investigation that was done with that regard? But employees are complaining that they did not get the fund. The labor some labor brokers are saying they must go to the employer, and the employer says, no, your money is with the labor broker. If that can be clarified, Chair, thanks very much.
Thank you, Honorable Mkonto. Honorable Ndabe.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, and good morning to the members, the Minister, the Department, as well as the Office of the Auditor-General. We are challenged, Chairperson. We have just lost the electricity due to load shedding, and the connection is a bit of a problem. However, we are able to reconnect. My first clarity-seeking question is to the Office of the Auditor-General. Was there an engagement letter in terms of auditing the system prior to the payment of the TERS benefits that was presented to the department, so that therefore then the department will look at the deficiencies that were identified, or the audit process that would be followed. That is the first part. On the issue of the unsubstantiated applications with no invoices to the value of about 1.3 billion. If you may elaborate further, what is meant? I'm trying to reconcile this in my mind with a lack of understanding in terms of how the systems operate. How were these payments made without the invoices? It just makes me think that it seems as if it was a free-for-all system. It doesn't make sense. The other issue, Chair, it seems as if there is a lot that we need to deal with, because on just these 2 hours that we are allocated on virtual, might not be enough to be able to interrogate the president, because there will be issues that would require the department to respond to. There will be issues that the AG's office would have to clarify. I'm not sure how would you going forward, and suggestions that might be put in place to deal with this matter. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ndabe. Honorable Hermans. Welcome back.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and thank you for welcoming me back, though I'm not yet back. Chair, just few questions. The first one, I will appreciate the presentations made by the Auditor General's office, and also the highlights by the Minister. Chairperson, what I would like to know, the weaknesses that were identified within our system, the controls of the system, was it identified after the 5.7 million, or was it before that? The reason why I'm asking this is that it was confirmed to the portfolio committee to say now the measures that are put in place are able to identify whether a person is double dipping, whether a person is getting some benefits from other institutions. I just want to check that. And then the second issue, Chair, with the funds that are supposed to be recouped from those that have been paid incorrectly. So we have your NSFAS, the students that received benefits, whether knowingly or first issue is that when you look into the periods of the payment of the UIF benefits and the periods of the NSFAS receiving what they are supposed to be receiving from government, it's almost the same period. How will we be able to identify whether this person was part of these processes, these fraudulent processes, or it was a mistake, whatever mistake that have made the person to be paid? Because when I'm expecting money that I'm supposed to be getting for my studies and everything, and I receive money, I will take that money that it is mine. The third issue, Chair, is there any link between these activities and our banks? Because these payments goes to the bank. I mean, in a bank of a person who's getting a salary on monthly basis of, let me say, 5,000 Rand, and immediately there's a million or more than, or an amount more than 500,000 that is paid into this account, that institution immediately is supposed to see that there is something wrong here and follow it up. In terms of the fraudulent activities within the department and the bank, are there any linkages? Possibly it will not be said because all those issues are still under investigation. The issue of the public servants, Chair, do we have those that have reported that I see that I've received UIF benefits and I did not apply for it because I'm getting my salary or whatever? Those that have not reported and have used these monies, will it be the person who will voluntarily pay it back, or that person will be forced by law? Okay, the person will be forced by law. Can that money be taken from the person's salary? Those that are within government. I know that there are a number of processes that you have to give permission or everything. The involvement of the staff of UIF, Chair, because we have different units that are working with these payments. It's not one unit where you will do the application, everything, you verify. You have any link within the system itself at UIF, where you will say this one that is doing verification is working with the one that is doing applications? Because in that process, these things were supposed to be detected, because it's not the same person that received application, process application, verify and confirm and look the issue of the banking details and everything. It's different people. Are there any linkages within the department itself? Those are the few questions that I have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Hermans. Honorable Nonsele. Honorable Nonsele. Honorable Nonsele.
He might have a challenge with the connection, Chair, but I'm not sure because there is no electricity in Acacia. It just went out.
Oh, God. Whilst we are waiting for Honorable Nonsele, can we then get for me, Minister, and the Office of the AG, I've just, I don't know which slide was that when you said, if I got it correctly, that you went to verify, you verified some of the companies and you find though some of them deserted. Are you still going to continue as you are doing your audit? Are you still going to continue to check on some of those companies, even those that, if I think we'll appreciate to get the number of those that are deserted, those that have made wrong applications, are those that have made wrong applications, were those applications made deliberate? Is there fraud within that space? Because as we are looking, also concentrating into the fraud and corruption within the fund itself, but we should also be exposed to the number depth of the corruption, with which then that means companies. Secondly, is it going to be possible? I'm not expecting you to do that now, but my humble proposal, Minister, in the Office of the AG, is that the breakdown of these public servants in terms of provinces and sectors, is that possible? Because we are to know who are these public servants who have applied in UIF. Is it themselves? How did the UIF manage to get a personal number of a person? I'm making an example, who is working in Doraginza. Has there been a collaboration between the UIF staff and the staff in the public service? Those will be my questions and my comments. Thank you very much. Whilst we are waiting for Honorable Nontsele, we'll then request the Office of the AG and then the Minister to respond on some of these questions and comments that have been made. Thank you very much.
Chair, I think Honorable Nontsele has just joined in again.
Honorable Nontsele. Honorable Nontsele. Whilst we are waiting for him, can we get the responses? Thank you very much. AG.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think some of the questions were overlapping with each other, so I'm going to try and group them. And then I'll leave some of the questions so that...
Sorry, Chair. Just before Ms. Komapi continues, you had requested that a person by the name of Luyolo should identify where the person is from. That person has not identified himself or herself. Sorry for that. It sounds small, but it's a big issue. Thank you.
Sorry, Ms. Komapi. Thank you. Mr. Sakaza, who is this Luyolo?
Sorry, Chair. Mama, can you request on my behalf to play a speaker on your phone so that I can yeah.
Honorable Nontsele, are you back?
Chairperson, can I request to put my phone on speaker for Honorable Nontsele?
What's happening now? Honorable Nontsele? Honorable Nontsele? Mr. Sakaza, what's happening?
Chair, Mr. Luyolo Loa, I removed him out of the meeting, Chair. So Mr. Nontsele is supposed to be back in the meeting now.
I can. Hello, Chair.
Yes, Honorable Nontsele.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes.
Uvakala kude Mr. Nontsele.
Yes, Mr. Honorable Nontsele.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, Honorable Nontsele, we can hear you.
Chair, can I? Okay. Chair, the quick one, because of this situation, I would want to make a proposal. I'm afraid, because this debate is going to result on a hit and miss. We are presented with the report for the first time. And there are areas that, in my view, would necessarily be areas for direct SIU or police investigation that would not necessarily be resolved at this platform. But equally, I would want to see a situation where we would have formal responses by the department itself, so that when we debate having had both sides of the story, that comes of the audit and the response by the department. In my view, it would help, therefore, to, in fact, to allow the department to fund this, so that the reason for that is that and some of them contradict quite immensely some of the reports that already have been presented by the department. So in a way, my personal view would be, it would be a bit of a futile exercise for us to engage now substantively on the report until the department itself makes formal responses to the audit outcomes, and then we engage with both aspects of the report. That is the end of the audit. The office of the agent and that of the, so that would be my take and my proposal. Sorry for not being able to greet anyone, because I'm sitting here under pressure because of the load shedding, and my gadget is really giving up. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Nonsel. Can we then allow, with that proposal, can we allow that some of the there are comments that have been made where there are questions that have been asked, and my understanding is that members, when asking those questions, they are asking those questions with the understanding that this is not the beginning of the end, but we are beginning to then unpack. We are still going to come back in October, and the Auditor-General's office is then, it is still going to do the work. The SIU will do its work, but will it not be fair enough that some of the comments and questions, and they will indicate on those questions that they think they can't then respond on them today? Can we then allow maybe the AG's office first to come in, and then we'll then allow the minister to be the last? AG?
Thank you, Chairperson. As I was saying, some of the questions, they are other. So I'm going to try and put them in terms of categories. And obviously, there are questions that are more towards the minister and the department, and I will leave that part. But I think, Chair, I just wanted to reflect on one particular question around the engagement letter and how the audit would have been. Let me take an opportunity to reflect again the we tailored it. So the intention of the audit was by no means to replace the management activity. It was also not intended to take over some of the activities prior to management applying themselves and rolling out those processes. So to that effect, how we would have structured this audit is we would have allowed management to put together a control system. We would have allowed them to do the testing. We would also allow them to then execute, and the execution would also include the payments of some of these claims. However, we had deliberately made sure that the audit happens in between the payments, so that there's an opportunity for us to reflect on how the implementation took place and provide management an opportunity for them to enhance the processes before they continue with other payments as well. So we do that because the main thing we still needed to maintain from the audit office was the independence thereof, so that we don't overlap into the management territory, but at the same time, we are not too far so that they are able to access us when they need assistance and support. So if you look at how we structured the engagement letter in particular, we would have highlighted that particular process. So we would indicate what will be our focus. And we particularly said for the UIF, we are interested in the TERS payments. Yes, we looked at the supply chain and would have highlighted it, but the biggest part would have been mainly the TERS payments that would have taken place. For the first report, we targeted iteration 1 and iteration 2. That will cover mainly your March, your April period, because the intention was that as and when we issue the observations, they are able to integrate some of our recommendations and start enhancing the system as they do the payments as well. And UIF themselves, in some instances, they would have already done that. So take an example of the first iteration that would have been around manual, I think the March, April. So by the time they launched the system, some of the observation that we tried to put on the table, they would have already started to run with it and incorporate as part of the enhancement. So you would find that some of our report would have taken place as the system was advancing. The other part, Chair, was the data analytics that we performed. The data analytics that we were dealing with was mainly to also network the systems of government. Something that we observed that as government, we have not necessarily strengthened that process so that any entity whatsoever, UIF included, at any point in time, they can tap into government full data, because as government, you have quite a rich data to work with. So one of the things that we've done as the office was to consolidate the entire database of government, at least as far as we could, so that we are able to benefit and leverage on some of the information that government is already having access to, and then start to run with it. To a certain extent, UIF may have been able to tap into some of this data. To a certain extent, they may not even have had an opportunity to have those system networked, merely because as government, the systems are not as networked as they should be. There's an opportunity for us there as government to enhance and improve in that regard. So in that case, Chair, I just want to take then the categories of some of the questions. There was a question that says, do we think that there's room for the SIU to investigate? And definitely yes. How we positioned our report, we said these are the areas, the hot spots as we identified them. We would have told the fund as well which ones are more of the control deficiency, either the control breakdown, or we believe that there's absence of a preventative control that we're asking that the fund consider to improve. We would also have highlighted instances where we said, having looked at the data, UIF data itself and the data of government, there's an area that concerns us. But in that instance, it is not conclusive. We then say to the fund, go look further yourself. But we say in you looking further, source all the relevant entities that would assist you. And you will see throughout the report, we are also making reference to the Fusion Center, because we said there's a benefit there's a benefit with the fund and the department considering utilizing the Fusion Center that will give you an opportunity for the SIU, the Hawks, and all other parties that can investigate the matter better. Simply because as the audit office, we were not performing an investigation, we were performing an audit, therefore allowing all other investigating bodies an opportunity to zoom in on all the hotspots that we would have flagged for the purposes of the fund and the purposes of the investigating bodies. So definitely there is a room for either the SIU, the Hawks, and any other investigating body to then partner with the fund and the department in assisting them to look further in terms of what are some of these things that give an indication of fraud, and that fraud actually materialized. And what are these things that may have just been a pure error? And what are these things that could have been because of the misrepresentation that the employers and the companies themselves would have put on the table of the fund? So definitely there's a room for collaboration in that instance. Whether there's a question as well that said other persons that may have given rise to the fraud, as the office, we would not have taken it to that level. We would tell you what did not happen. Now, in terms of the motives and many other things, primarily because this was not an investigation, we would not have stretched it that level. And we then allow the department, obviously with the support of the DG and the minister, together with the fund management themselves, to then determine who should be assisting them in performing a thorough analysis and investigation in determining whether there was an intention to begin with from specific people. There was a question around finding number 13 in particular to say what is being done to recover the money. And Chairperson, that one I will leave it for the purposes of the DG and the Minister to talk to some of the processes that they already started to roll in the background to try and recover the money where the money landed, where it should not have landed. There was a question around finding 11, where you say, what does it mean in terms of the identity numbers that we say is invalid? That finding or that observation, what we basically did, we got into the system of the UIF and we extracted the ID numbers that they had captured on their system. So ordinarily, they would tell you that as an example, we paid 1,000 rand, or we paid 100 million, we paid to company so-and-so, and company so-and-so was intending to then disseminate the money or the funds to the following employees. And those ID numbers will be captured on the UIF system. What we did through our mechanisms, of course, we would have extracted that data, take it and collide it with the Home Affairs database to try and identify whether the person as captured in the UIF system, it is the same person as the Home Affairs would have identified. So there were instances where when we take that ID number, it would not correlate with the information that Home Affairs would have shared with us, because we have the database of Home Affairs to a certain extent. So those ID numbers would be thrown out in terms of they are invalid. And it could be many things. The fund can, as they do the investigation, they can come and say, look, there was just an error in capturing it in the system, or they can come back and say, look, yes, this person doesn't exist, or whatever the case may be. But it was not concluding to say these invalid people were deceased. We have a finding where we are particularly saying these one, they definitely had passed away, because we would have checked it against the Home Affairs. So the invalid ID, we basically saying the ID per UIF records, it is not founded when you go to the Home Affairs. There was a finding in particular to talk to, are there any other investigations against individuals? Chairperson, I'll leave that one for the Minister and the department. And then there was a question around the possible double dipping that we are talking to. And I'm gonna marry it to the question around the NSFAS. Was it an error, and what would particularly have transpired? Maybe let me just clarify what we've done in that space. There we went into government space. What are other interventions that government have rolled down? So either in the form of a normal social grant that is being given, or the COVID-19 grant that government would have put in place. We would have also went and said there are people that rightfully government is supporting them to pursue their studies, and they will be on the NSFAS. We were then colliding that information with the people that the UIF have paid. The moment that we pick up that there is the same person who would have gotten support from the NSFAS perspective, and at the same time they're getting the UIF, we then highlight it and we flag it and we put it on the table of the fund. We do so for the fund to then look in deeper so that they are able to determine, was it the intention for government to channel the funds and the support to the same individual, or the intention was to try and make sure that at least we spread the support as far as possible so that as many citizens get supported. And that information and that investigation is that we get the right answers of, have we given money to the people that we should not be giving them? If the answer is yes, we've given it incorrectly to the people, we need to be saying what would have happened. Did they mislead us? And if they did mislead us, what are other processes that needs to follow? And we do so that we can allow instances where perhaps somebody comes and say, there was a legit reason why this particular person needed to get the TERS benefit and also get some sort of a government support. and then that reason be put on the table for further interrogation and collaboration with other entities. And that would cover the finding that we termed double dipping. There we particularly just say these are a group of individuals. Either you are paying them through PESAL, which would mean that you employed them. If you employed them, why are they coming to UIF? Are you comfortable? So there we are not concluding there. We are then saying, can the fund, in collaboration with all other investigating bodies, look further and determine whether it was your intention as government to channel your funds to the same people that may have benefit from other processes. There was a question around what are the current databases that UIF is using? I'll leave that for the DG to respond to. But from the audit office, we would have in the main utilized the database from SARS, we would have utilized the database from SIPS, we would have tapped into the SASA, we tapped into the Home Affairs in the main, we would have tapped into NSFAS, as you would have seen. So as many databases as we could get our hands on, we networked it to try and just support the fund better. There were a question around were there any other investigation, were there specific investigation with regard to the labor brokers? Our audit was inclusive of either the payment was made directly to an employee or it was made through a certain medium. And in the main, the mediums would have been your bargaining council or it would have been through an employer. The process that we have not yet gotten to conclusion on, it is basically visiting those who received the money in determining whether that money was disseminated to the intended beneficiary. We started with that process, but we would not have had a mileage in terms of the conclusions of whether there was validity where the money, in terms of where the money ended up. That's why you see at the end of our report, we just highlighted the few employers that we would have visited. And those employers, we would also include the labor brokers that would have been given the money by the fund. So that process, we are intending to incorporate it in the report SR2, the special report 2 in particular, that is scheduled for end of November. Now, there was a question around what does the unsubstantiated payment mean? The query around the unsubstantiated payment, we basically say you have a payment system and they will call it a computron. You also have a payment, a claim system that you call a TERS system. What we were doing as an audit office, we would take the two systems and obviously collide the information with one another to try and see if in all instances where the payments were made, are they supported by an invoice? And is that invoice articulative as well of the people, individuals that the money was intended for? So there we were just doing the reconciliations and instances where there were amounts that could not be supported from our reconciliation perspective based on the data that was given to us. We then flagged it for management to look further into it so that they can determine, could it be because of the data that they had provided? Could it be that there is something over and above the data that need to be investigated, indications of fraud and otherwise? So that's primarily what we're indicating. It is mainly the reconciliation process that we would have followed, Chairperson. There was a question around, obviously, the public servants that I covered partially in terms of do we have a detailed listing? Yes, we do. We had shared it with the fund. We had shared it with the DG, so the department would know the specific individuals that we had flagged. But obviously, it was more for the department and the fund to look further in terms of whether they rightfully needed to get that money and whether government is comfortable to provide those particular individuals the TERS benefit over and above some of the benefits that, and if there's a rationale and the reasoning beyond. So definitely the details are there. There was a question that you raised. You cut a bit, but when I could get your question eventually, you were talking towards the fraud in relation to the private sector. And how I narrated it in my mind is that you're saying, we should be cognizant as well that there could be fraud that is not necessarily from internal, but it manifesting from the private sector. And definitely, one of the big risks that we highlighted would be the additional people that previously would not have been insured by the fund. But obviously, because of the country understanding the difficult circumstances that we were all going through, the call was made that let's accommodate those employees so that they do, due to the non-compliance of their own employers. In that regard, you're then running a big risk of not necessarily knowing who you are paying for, because you wouldn't have information prior to the pandemic that can assist you in validating their existence, whether their salaries are accurate and the likes. And there's a big risk there. And my understanding is that that's what necessitated the fund to introduce what they call a post-validation process and follow the money in an attempt to determine whether there is certain fraudulent activity that may have happened from the employer perspective. From the AGSA, we're cognizant of that. That's the reason why we are visiting selected employers for the purposes of Special Report 2, so that we are able to assist the fund in determining the pockets where they may have been misled and misrepresented that came through from the private sector in particular. Okay. There was a question. Yes, Chair. You may go ahead.
Are you wrapping up?
Yes, I am, Chair.
Okay.
Yes, I think that the comment that was made around getting a broader picture, even from the department, it will be important, because I would want to believe that subsequent to our audit, Chair, there may have been other analysis that they've made on our finding, and they're able to share with the committee what are those elements that really are worrisome to the extent that they require the SIU and the Fusion Center, and what are these other pockets that they have valid explanations that can attend to the questions that we put on the table. I'll summarize it like that, Chair. Thank you so much for an opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Komape. Minister? Is Minister still around?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So can you, yes.
I must concede from the onset that I might not be able to answer these questions. I will talk in general terms because they go deep to the issues of the operations. And you know my actions, removing that top management there. Vice State, the acting commissioner now, who started only yesterday, is also here, but I think he's listening and taking notes seriously on the issues. But I've also requested Advocate Yawa, who's the head of the HR in the UIF, to also link in. I'm not sure if the DG is back, but let me just try and talk to some of the issues. In fact, even before that, maybe the committee, and I don't have a right to direct the committee on how it does its business. Mine is to account. But maybe the committee should take that suggestion, consider that suggestion, because I don't think the information we can give today, or myself, not sure if the DG is back, would be able to answer, in fact, even a quarter of the questions which have been raised here. Maybe you have to give yourself time and allow the department to come back with the issues which they are implementing as a result of the audit and all the other questions which you have raised. But let me just start with a few areas. I think there was a question about, is there room for the SIU to come and look at the issues of criminality and so on? Clearly, I think Ms. Komapi has answered that. In fact, that is the first institution we submitted our report to. we submitted that to the SIU because we wanted them to dive in and look for these criminal activities and even the criminals within and outside the system. And also the Fusion Center, we did that. And by their nature, some of these, if they are criminal in nature, you have to allow for the law enforcement to quickly deal with that. And we're happy because the Fusion Center, it's a combination of almost all the law enforcement and the department, including the state security, so that they do those investigations. But unfortunately, we can't control those investigations. We won't be able to say how long they might take. And you know that once the matter is in the hands of the law enforcement, we sit back and supply the necessary information. But I must also indicate that there are further investigations we are also doing through a forensic, and we've requested the people from EAG to give us the providers. And those people have started because we have to go deep into other areas. And we're able to follow the people. And the timelines of these investigations and even the disciplinary process, these are going to be determined by those who are investigating. And you know, investigations can take a very long time. But given the fact that the AG had already done a lot of work, it's easy for the law enforcement to say, we will focus into these areas. So the areas of focus where there are very serious or suspicious transactions, they can be able to just go move into those very quickly and interrogate the people who are wrong beneficiaries, including the issue of the companies. And I must emphasize, I said the other day, it takes two to tango. It's clear that some of the civil servants have not been working alone. They have been working with some companies. Sometimes it might even be bogus companies. And sometimes they even produce all the necessary documentation that they have, they are registered, they are genuine companies. But I'm not saying it's like that. But of course, in a collusion, people do all sorts of things. So the issue then of also you want to say the convictions. Remember that people have the rights. They will go to court and put very formidable defense. And I'll tell you something, my little experience at Public Works, which also had a lot of rot. Public Works, Honorable Mkonto, you'd deal with the officials who were dealing with service providers. When they go to court, you find them having very powerful advocates, and you start asking, how do these people pay these powerful advocates? It becomes very clear that there are other principles, in inverted commas, come in to help those people. So people have their rights and you can't query the representative. So it's going to depend on the nature of the cases which we're putting and the evidence which we're putting in court. And that belongs to the courts when you say you want to see people in the prison. But we are trying by all means to ensure that there is proper evidence. We'll draw from the AG, we'll draw from the further investigations, and we've been promised by the Treasury that these people who are going to do further investigations are going to move very quick. So the SIU has said where they have jurisdiction, they will move very quickly. And where they do not have, they would refer those issues to the other law enforcement. In fact, UDJ is interacting with them. And I guess the very meeting which he's gone to is part of the process. In terms of the workers, we think that is a low-hanging fruit. Those who benefited from the public service and those who benefited from NSFAS and also from within UIF itself. We think that that's a low-hanging fruit to quickly dig within a few days with information. We will be waiting for that for those who are doing that work next week. Honorable Mdabe, these payments which were made without the invoices. In fact, understanding this environment of pressure, the environment where people were working within, one of the things, excuse me, and I think one of the things which I also considered too, and I think AG also raised this issue, talks to the issue of when we opened the floodgates through the resolutions of NETLEC and the pressure in the country that there are a lot of people who are suffering. And even if people have not been part of the system of the UIF, because it's not their mistakes, but the employers would need to sign acknowledgement of debt, you must pay. Don't come with the stories. And I think out of that, we opened the floodgates and more numbers just came in. I won't be able to say how much are those numbers, but I won't be shocked even if it means close to 50% of the people we dealt with were also the new numbers where they were not registered by the various employees. And I think that's where the loopholes were. It's in that particular area. But it doesn't justify that we don't have these systems. We are investigating some of the issues, whether it was just a mistake, a slip on those who are dealing with the system. But we are not convinced when we look at the report from the Treasurer, Honorable Hermanus. There are clear patterns in some of these areas. And if there are clear patterns, you might be able to say it is deliberate. Very early in the process, from a whistleblower saying, hey, your system is very easy to manipulate. I have 3 people who say they've received money and because they were able to manipulate your system. Then I go to the UIF management, I say, please deal with this issue of the system because some people have given me this particular information and I want us to follow that. I'm ready to give you the details of such people who have told me that so that you follow them. And you might find that this thing is so widespread. Then I was assured that no, we've quickly dealt with, I don't know the fields of a system or whatever, but I was told, no, we've quickly, on a number of issues, these controls, we raised them, or I raised them as the minister together with the deputy minister to say, be very careful because you're dealing with huge monies, you're dealing with huge numbers. There will always be elements who would want to loot this particular system. And you must make sure that you close all those loopholes. And yeah, I've talked about people who are public servants. Obviously, we are going to follow all the companies. We have said there is a process which we call follow the money. And I think the UIF commissioner at some stage talked about putting an amount, a big amount, in order to employ a number of auditors who are going to follow almost all the companies which we've paid, which then says the process indeed does not end here. We are continuing as we are getting the criminal cases, prosecuting the people, the individuals and the companies. This matter will be continuing in terms of the investigation. Yes, we'll be able, Chairperson, to do a breakdown which departments are coming from. Some of these people, we might even get more. We have been able to, we know that it's defense thus far, and we know about NASFAS. And what I've already, and I think there's a very fundamental question asked by Honorable Cardio, which talks about, and the AG tried to answer that question. The issue of the government IT system is a very serious matter. And we will have to zoom into that particular area. Already, this is a matter which I've raised with the various departments who are dealing with the big transactions, the SASA, that is the social development. I've raised this matter with the Department of Education, with Home Affairs, and we just need to pull a lot of experts, even from the private sector, together with the AG to come and make suggestions, including SARS. And funny enough, we had given the instruction to the people to work with SARS, to also work with the banks. And to my disappointment, when I was asking some of the people who are in the banking industry who are leading, what happened to the initiative? They say, no, there was no appetite from your management of the UIF, although we had started the discussions, but there was no appetite. That's a matter which I'm going to follow as and when, now that I've suspended the people, I have to look what have they done, what have they not done. But I was, now I've suspended on the basis of the audit and some of what I would call the basic controls which were supposed to be there. And in fact, if we do not have this system which talks to all the systems which government is having, we are going to go nowhere. If there were to be something on a huge scale, we are going to have the same disaster which we are seeing now. So this is a matter which I am going to escalate to the cabinet so that President can direct us to put maybe an IMC of those affected departments together with the experts in the field. And I must say this, I don't think these institutions have employed the right competent people, and they have the right structures, and I'm repeating it, and even the business model. Because if you're running such a huge fund just along the lines of the department, you're not going to succeed. Or the compensation fund, which is a big insurance. And I think that's where you need this fundamental restructuring. I know honorable members have not answered all the questions. I've talked in general terms, and including the issue of the role of the internal audits. I have to interrogate that. If it means I have to dissolve them, they have not played the role they were supposed to play, I have to do that. But also we must, and I think this is a legislative, you can't have a structure with a huge fund like that, leave the management issues. It has a commissioner, but you also have a board which is formed by the different stakeholders. And that board is advisory, but is very assertive. All issues are approved by that particular board, even before they come to the ministry. And I think these are the issues which we have to look at. It's either you have to have a board with full powers, or you don't have a board at all. So these are the issues we have to be talking about as we move, and the medium to long-term issues. But I was suggesting then, unless Advocate Yawa can be able to make some comments, but I'm still suggesting that I've not answered almost all the questions which have been raised. We might need to go back and come back in a full session on this particular item, Chairperson. But I can't direct you. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you very much, the office, Ms. Komape. I think this first meeting, it's a meeting that because we saw everything on the media at the same time, and then there were questions that were being directed to the chair, and I in consultation with the House Chair, he agreed that we have to call the office of the AG. Obviously, it is a process that we have been exposed to, and it's not the last. They are still continuing, but as they continue, when we then meet them again, because they are still going to come, we will then have an understanding of when then the proclamation was made, because they did say in the presentation, this is a unique process of audit, as it has been proclaimed by the president. I think it's what is called, it's a work in progress. Obviously, we were given a presentation. There are clarities that we have to ask, and they have been responded, still doing the work. And in terms of the department, I think what the minister has outlined to us, what necessitated them to take the action that they have taken, both himself and the DG. And I think it's important for us to have that understanding as we are moving forward, because, honorable members, we have always had an interest in the UIF in particular. And when there was this presentation, which was a bombshell on TV by both the AG and the minister, the office thought that it's important that for members, before we rise, we have a clear picture and an understanding. They are still going to come back. The department is still going to come, still have to come back. So I thought this was a just for us to get an information, because it's what is called a work in progress. I want to thank the minister and the office of the Auditor-General for having for having this time with us in this short notice and answering the clarities. We do have the document. I think it's a public domain. We will then have to look into it. Unfortunately, we can't have hard copies because we're still on lockdown. Some of us are still working at home. But thank you very much, Ms. Komape. On that note, I think you are excused. We'll still continue with our meeting. I just want first, as you are leaving the office of the AG, I want to check with the committee section, what time do we have from now for the presentations by the department on the procurement around COVID-19 issues. What time do we have from now?
Chair, I've just consulted with Mark. He's consulting with the IT and the committee section. They're saying, Chair, we can continue for now, and then he's gonna get back to me, Chair. Mark.
Okay. Okay. No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Komape. You and your team, you are excused. Not unless you still want to be with us. I don't have a problem with that, because it's also, I'm sure it will be an area of interest on your side. Minister, I don't know whether the DG is back, because we want to start with the department and then get presentations from the entities. Is there? He did say there is somebody that is going to start, who's going to present the department.
There he is.
Okay. Over to you.
He can't hide. He can run, but he can't hide. He's back, but.
DG.
Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, I've already asked the CFO of the department, Mr. Matuna, to run the presentation on our behalf.
Okay. Mr. Matuna.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members, colleagues. I hope the presentation.
Sorry, Chair. Madonna, it will be important that they see you first, and then you can continue. It's important to know the face of the person you're talking to. Just they see you, then you can switch off your video after that.
Thank you, Minister.
I have activated my camera. I'm not sure whether it's clear.
Yes, Mr. Matuna.
I have circulated the presentation. The presentation is quite short and succinct. There were a few questions in terms of the brief that we had to address. The first one was with regard to specific projects for COVID-19, which we have indicated that we didn't have no COVID-19 specific projects that was assigned. And as such, furthermore, there was also what we needed also to mention is that at the beginning of the lockdown, Treasury did ask around the departments in terms of tapping into the disaster management funds. They wanted some figures from us. However, that we also did not receive any funding from that disaster management fund. The funds were sourced within the department. The procurement was mainly the procurement of personal protective equipment and sanitizing services. Since we know that when the lockdown started, our inspectors, mainly health and safety, they were hard at work with some few companies around the country that needed special attention. As procurement, as a unit responsible for procurement, we had to step up to make sure that we provide protective equipment. At that time, I have to mention that it was quite a difficult position because we were competing with big departments. The suppliers that were available were concentrating on big orders, one for SAPS, defense, health. I can't remember the other big departments. So as the Department of Labor, we were scrambling on the leftovers at that time. But as far as possible, we then decided, because of that issue of the competition that was existing then, to say the provincial offices won't be able to get anything. It would be better for us to procure centrally so that we distribute to the offices for them to be able to work. And the figures that I am about to present indicate exactly that the main procurement took place at head office. There were some few procurement activities that happened in the provinces. The items that we procured were face shields, hand sanitizers, gloves, coveralls, body suits, PPE medical kits, thermometers, masks, spray bottles because we're buying hand sanitizers in big quantities. I think they were coming in 5 liters, and we needed then to distribute for consumption, put them into some small containers. Hence, we had to buy spray bottles for that particular purpose, surface cleaners for disinfection, office sanitation that we had to incur. In total, the total amount that we spent as a department during this period, at the initial period, it continued afterward with the disinfection of affected offices now that we pick up now and then. But at the time, we spent 12,712,367 rand 75 cents. The next slide is just the breakdown of that 12 million. As I indicated earlier, that I think as far as possible, the procurement was centralized. So that's where you see 10.37 million at head office that was spent by head office. Western Cape came to 299,000, KZN 463,000, GP at 244,000, Eastern Cape at 361,000, Free State at 579,000, Limpopo at 119,000, Northwest at just about 22,000, Mpumalanga 196,000, and Northern Cape 53,000. Furthermore, I have engaged the DG in terms of just in the provinces, just to test that we are happy with the small procurement that happened in the provinces. I am busy undertaking just some tests on some few amounts that I'm not so comfortable with in the provinces, although there might be small amount, but controls remain control. One of the items that I need to mention that I am also quizzing is that delivery charge that appears in Eastern Cape. Although it's 10,000, but for me it's quite questionable because the delivery charges are normally priced along inside the item that you are buying. So to pay it separately, it's probably a question mark that I'm also quizzing, that I've also discussed with the DG to say on the provinces, although the amount is not so huge, but I am quizzing just some few transactions just to be compatible that I'm happy with the procurement. Chair, that's the breakdown of the total of 12.7 million that the department has spent on procurement for COVID-19 related items, mainly PPE for the department. Thank you.
Can we get the next, because we'll take all of them so that members then ask questions. Can we get the next entity? Did you indicate?
Chair, can I apologize? You remember when I started, I told you that I was from a NETLEC session, the high-level meeting of the leaders dealing with this.
You are? Come again?
I said when we started, I was from a NETLEC meeting, which started at 8. Now,
Okay.
I'm supposed to go back to that meeting because I'm the senior government leader. There are issues. Thank you.
Okay. Is the DM, the DM is still around?
TM?
Okay, can we then get the entity to present DG?
Thank you, Chair. We'll get Productivity SA, and Datem Motiba is around.
Mr. Motiba?
Thank you, Chairperson and honorable members. I'm making available the Productivity SA presentation on the procurement during the COVID period. Just to give an indication, I hope the presentation is showing, Chairperson.
It is showing.
Thank you very much. Upon reflection on the request by the committee, we felt that we should give you an indication of procurement that covers the period March to the end of August 2020. And because we are a small entity, this actually resulted in us spending over 93,000 rand. And to mitigate any other challenges and risks associated with procurement, despite the fact that National Treasury provided guidelines in terms of emergency procurement, we stuck with our procurement policy as well as National Treasury guidelines. So we did not deviate in any way from our supply chain management committee. And we proceeded with ensuring that because these are small amounts, we then proceeded with procuring through the 3 quotation system. And it should be noted also that our quotations for deep cleaning of offices, particularly in Cape Town, Durban, and Port Elizabeth, were requested for a period of at least 3 months, having noted that there were challenges with getting service providers in these areas. And also that for purposes of cloth masks, we actually, in consultation with the department, purchased from the supported employment enterprises. Again, still ensuring that we are within the supply chain management process. Our observation during this period was that, however, procurement of PPEs was difficult around March and April due to unavailability of stock, especially face masks, and that they are noticeable. We have noticed that there are price variances between provinces, particularly in small, in areas where we have small offices. In particular, that's what we experienced in Port Elizabeth. In the next slide, we're just giving you a breakdown of the procurement per category. The committee will note that the larger amount of about 49,000 was spent on deep cleaning. And then the second was face masks. And we are giving you an indication in terms of breakdown of the 93 million that we spent. In the next slide is just the detailed expenditure per supplier. One thing that gave us a bit of a challenge, if you look at one of the deep cleaning, particularly in the Port Elizabeth office, and when we're comparing it with what we procured in terms of the office in Johannesburg as well as Cape Town and Durban, is that this was a little bit more, despite the fact that it was within the procurement processes. But then there's a vast difference in terms of what we could get in the other areas, and that's why we came to the conclusion that there are challenges in these smaller spaces that we have to operate in, and probably that could be the benefit of economies of scale. But in a nutshell, I would want to conclude to the committee and submit that despite the challenges that were experienced, we have not experienced any irregular and or wasteful expenditure during this period of time. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, sir. Can we get the next one, DG?
The next one will be Nedlek, Chairperson.
Nedlek.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Okay, let's see. My mic is on. Okay. Good morning, Chairperson and members of the committee. My name is Nobuntu Sibisi. I'm the head of program operations at Nedlek. I will be presenting on behalf of Nedlek. I am in this meeting together with the Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Jonas Shai, and the Executive Director, Ms. Seftel, has extended apologies as she's not able to attend this meeting. Okay, let me see.
Why is she not able to attend?
She is chairing the meeting on the economic recovery plans, which the minister has also requested to be excused to go and attend. It's with social partners. It started at 8 this morning and it's still ongoing, Chairperson.
Yeah, it's very important to explain the apology so that the committee is aware. Thank you very much. You may continue.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me share. Okay, I'm just share the presentation, Chairperson. Is it visible from your side? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Chairperson. So the presentation today will cover the introduction as well as information on COVID-related procurement that has been made by Nedlek from April to date, and the conclusion as well. And then in terms of the introduction, I'd like to basically outline that this report talks to the procurement of Nedlek on procurement that are related to COVID-19. And Nedlek, like many organizations, found itself having to procure urgently some of the goods and services in order to ensure the protection of staff and its other stakeholders. And also some of the procurement that was done by Nedlek was for the work that was done by the Rapid Response Task Team in terms of responding to the urgent need of the country to prepare employees and employers as well as communities in respect of the health and safety measures, and also looking at other measures that social partners had to put in place to mitigate against the impact of COVID-19 on the lives and livelihoods of South Africans. So the procurement that was conducted by Nedlek was in relation to the following three categories. The first category is in relation to procurement of cleaning services for the Nedlec house or the Nedlec property, and then procurement of PPE for all staff members at Nedlec, as well as procurement of legal services for drafting of the, in terms of the documents that relate to the COVID-19 Rapid Response Task Team at Nedlec. Perhaps if I can just outline the COVID-19 Task Team, Chairperson, is a task team that was established by Nedlec social partners soon when the country was faced with this COVID-19 pandemic, in order to have all social partners participating and ensuring ensuring that the country responds positively in this regard. And so on procurement relation to cleaning services is that we procured the services for disinfection of Nedlec premises during the time of reopening of the Nedlec house for staff members during level 4, in line with the return to work programs, and also disinfecting of Nedlec premises following the incidents that we have had at Nedlec on staff COVID incidents. And then the category 2 relates to protective, personal protective equipment and procurement of sanitizers as well. And then the category 3, as I've mentioned, it relates to the services which were procured for COVID-19 related services. The first one being drafting of an urgent think piece to extend the unemployment insurance coverage to atypical workers. And these are workers who are employed, either self-employed in an informal or formal sectors of the economy. And that's due basically to COVID. And then the other service which we have procured during this period is technical expertise to the Presidential Coordinating Unit, which we refer to in short as the PCU, in order to develop an urgent implementing plan to refocus the job summit commitments and relook at the economic crisis that has been caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And still on category 3, Chairperson, is the legal drafting for the rapid response task team in relation to the directions on OHS and the public transport directions. In terms of the amounts that were spent on these procurement, the first one is the cleaning services, which was procured through a deviation process, and that added to 4,370. And procurement of sanitizers, that was about 2,484. And then the 2 incidents of cleaning services in response to the COVID challenges that or scares or cases that we have had. It's 4,000. The first one was 4,370, which was sanitizing of the whole Nedlec house. And then the last one there, Chairperson, is 862 rand 50 cents, which only focused on the affected sections in relation to those COVID incidents. So we didn't sanitize the whole house, but we sanitized the relevant departments or floors where the staff were based in. And the total amount in relation to the procurement on these cleaning services and sanitizing is about 12,000, Chairperson. And then the category 2, as I've outlined earlier, the category that relates to legal services, we also procured through deviation the services of Paul Benjamin and Daisy Dutoit for 57,000 in relation to that urgent think piece to extend the UI coverage to atypical workers. And then the other amount, which is about 91,000 on legal drafting for the rapid response task team in terms of the directions on public transport relating to staggering of working hours and safety in the public transport. And then the other amount is about 249,000, and this relates to the amount that was paid to the service provider Bradley Conrati and Halton Shekel Company for the workplace health and safety direction. And the last one, Chairperson, is the amount that was paid to the service provider Andreas Conradi for the repositioning of the job summit agreements. And in total, the legal services that, or the amount that was paid to legal service providers in total is about 573,000. And then lastly, the breakdown on PPE is purchasing of hand gloves, and that amount was about 900,000, and this we procured through the three-code system, as well as procurement of safe shields, which was about 1,500, also procured through quotations, and procurement of masks for NEDLEC staff of about 3,500, and this was also procured through quotations. And the total amount for PPE, Chairperson, is 5,900. In conclusion, Chairperson, NEDLEC continues to engage in its COVID-19 rapid response task team work, and urgent matters are still being addressed through that system. And mostly the work of NEDLEC has been conducted remotely since the mid-March, when the country was on the level 5 of the lockdown. However, there are now staff coming into the building on as and when required basis, and several measures are taken into consideration when staff are coming to NEDLEC, including the screening processes that is undertaken before they come to NEDLEC. Thank you, Chairperson. That's all from me.
Thank you, ma'am. Gigi.
The next one is compensation fund, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, honorable members, and to the Deputy Minister. Can I request that the NEDLEC presentation go off so that I can beam the compensation fund presentation?
We're waiting for NEDLEC to take off its presentation. Thank you.
I've unshared. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I will take the members through the presentation of the compensation fund. I will start my slide share. We have the background which is known to the committee around the compensation fund. I will request that I go straight to slide number 8, which starts to talk to the business continuity measures that the fund implemented that necessitated the funding of the PPE items, as well as slide number 12, where we now detail the procurement that took place. Without wasting time, Chair, I'll go to slide number 8, which is the business continuity plans. The fund activated its crisis management committee in terms of the business continuity plans during the month of March in order to plan for the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact that it may have on our operations. And this comprises of senior managers in the fund, as well as those in the provincial offices, including the head of employee wellness, who is also been appointed as the COVID-19 compliance officer for the fund. And as part of the process, we had to then identify the mission critical functions that we needed to make sure that they continued operating regardless of the lockdown restrictions. And the then also at the different levels of the alert levels of the lockdown, we determine the number of staff that would require to operate in the offices, as well as those that would then work in the from home, because majority of the services of the fund are available and accessible to clients of the fund online, both on the employer side as well as on the employee side. So we needed to make sure that the operations of the fund continues regardless of the fact that the country was in lockdown. As I indicated, all activities continued. We extended the season for the return of earnings that needed to be submitted to allow employers to be able to do that. We made available all services online and provided some indication of where we can be accessed for services. And when we moved into alert level 3, the walk-in center at the Pretoria office of the Compensation Fund was also reopened, and we were then able to start seeing clients also coming into the building. So when we go to the procurement that we then did to make sure that we enable this business continuity plan of the fund to respond to COVID-19, we then did some procurement for the officials that is sitting at the head office, as well as those that are in the process. And there we were making sure that then we augment some of the things that may have been procured also through the department, as well as through the provincial offices in the department. So the procurement in total, we were looking at the 138 staff that were based in head office, as well as the 519 that were then spread out in the labor centers and the provincial offices. So our procurement comprised of two things, Chairperson. One, we needed to enable all our claims processing to continue. So we also then did a procurement for mobile devices, computers, as well as 3G devices for them to be able to connect, where we then were able to migrate all our claims processing staff in the provincial offices and in the labor centers to fully mobile devices, so that even on those days that they are not in the office, the work of the compensation fund continues. We spend about 15.6 million rands on the laptops that we then procured, as well as the 3G devices. We also then procured the PPE for staff, for those who are operating in the offices, and the total spend as at end of July 2020, we had spent 1.7 million on the PPE for the compensation fund. Chair, the next slide just then breaks down, and we've also provided the details in terms of where and how many laptops. We bought 150 laptops, and how we procured these. We procured it through the RFQ process that is outlined in the CETA process, or in the CETA contracts, and we were able to procure this, and delivery took place from June. We have been then dispersing the laptops to the labor centers, and most of the offices have now received the laptops and have continued to operate. So the next slide then just also shows the PPEs that we procured, the just disinfectant wipes, sanitizers, masks, and so on. All the procurement, with the exception of two items, Chair, in the last slide, we did a normal 3-code request for quotation process, and we were then able to procure these through that particular process. We only did deviations on two items, which was the surgical masks at the beginning of the lockdown, as well as hand sanitizers, because at the beginning of the lockdown, we still had a lot of our staff still coming into the office, and we were also hosting the department as the operations center during that first stage of the lockdown. So we then had to procure a lot of these items on an emergency basis, and also the fact that the issues that were raised by the DOL CFO earlier around competition for the items that we needed to procure, because everybody was buying things at the same time. So it was a bit difficult to also even get the quotations and the items at the speed that we wanted. So the only areas where we deviated was then procurement worth about 270,000, but the rest of the procurement was done through the normal supply chain processes. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. The next presentation, please.
Is UIF, Chair?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to the members. If you will excuse me, I've just had a terrible attack of sneezing. If you'll just allow me to get rid of the sneezing. Just a moment, please, Chair. Thank you, Chair. If I can ask Mr. Dlwengu to just beam the presentation. Chair, thank you. This is the presentation for the procurement for the UIF for the period, the TERS procurement. I'm just waiting for it to be beamed. Thank you. I trust that every member can see it. If we can move to slide number 7, please. I think that is where the crunch is in terms of the presentation. Yeah, there you are. During this period, there were 2 bids that went out from the UIF. Excuse me. The first one was the appointment of a service provider to do the audits in terms of TERS payments. Members will recall that the AG and the Minister this morning alluded to this, that the fund is appointing a service provider. Now, there you will see that there is a delay in awarding of this tender. But that is because, excuse me, because of the fact that during probity, there were certain discrepancies identified and that it had to be returned back to the bid evaluation committee. This should be finalized by this coming Tuesday so that the work can start. The next tender is the appointment of a service provider to render contact center services. And this process is also being delayed because of compliance issues that were raised during probity of the tender. If we could move to the next slide, slide number 8. Chairperson, this here is the detailed breakdown of the procurement that was done by the UIF. And I'm not going to go through it in detail, but you'll see that there is a procurement that was made for PPEs, as well as quite a lot of procurement that was made for media buying to advertise and sensitize our clients of the fund of the TERS payments that we're going to make and the system. The total amount is on this next slide, please. Thank you, Lily. Came to a total amount of 27.5 million. And the majority by far of this was for the media campaigns, etc. Now, there were some findings in terms of the procurement, and I think we have spent quite a lot of time this morning to these findings, but I would like us to just talk a little bit about a few on slide 13. Slide 13, you will see that some of these slides are the same as that which was presented by the AG this morning. On slide 13, you will see that there was a finding that was raised as that this appointment of the service provider was in contravention of the regulations and the instruction notes, because there were only quotations requested from these radio stations instead of looking, because the UIF only looked at the listeners' coverage, where exactly these radio stations was broadcasting and whether it was part of the target population that we wanted to serve, instead of obtaining 3 quotations as is per the supply chain processes. If we move to the next one, here there was also a finding, because you will notice, members, that under the heading BAC submission, which is the Bid Adjudication Committee submission, the same motivation was used for the different radio stations and for the different media groups, and that could not be correct. So it is clear that not proper research was done by the supply chain officials in terms of delivering motivations to the Bid Adjudication Committee and make sure that they do a proper job. On slide 15, here the Bid Adjudication Committee and Supply Chain chose the number 2 candidate instead of the number 1 recommended candidate, and the appointment was in contravention of Section 51 of the PFMA. And this was also because the specifications partly were not clear, and that is why they went and chose the second candidate. And Chairperson, you will recall that the Director of Supply Chain has been placed on precautionary suspension as a result of these findings that were brought to our attention. Chairperson, if I could then ask us to move to slide number 18. There was another finding in that not all the radio stations were afforded the opportunity to broadcast, or that the fund did not use all the radio stations, and that was found in contravention as well of the regulations. And the reasons why is provided by the UIF on the right-hand side, but nevertheless it is found to be contrary to the regulations of Treasury, National Treasury. Chairperson, then the corrective measures that the fund has decided upon in the last slide, the second to last slide, is to make sure that the specifications for all procurement which is larger than 500,000 will be subjected to a probity review, as well as the deferral of unfair awarding of tenders to the fraud unit for investigations, compliance checks on the transactions which will be conducted to make sure that we comply, as well as then GCIS will be utilized for communication services in future. Chairperson, thank you.
Chair, the next one is the SCE, Chair.
Are they around? Have they logged in?
They have to, Chair. Mr. Muratoba is here.
Okay.
Mr. Muratoba?
IDG, what issue do you want me to address again?
It's the SCE present. It's on the screen.
Okay. Can they put it DGI? Yeah.
Yes, it's on the screen.
Well, okay. I've done two things, DG. What the presentation, thanks, DG, and thanks to the chairperson and minister and colleagues. The presentation of the SEE also addresses the kind of PPE that we had to buy, but mainly it had to do with the chemicals that we needed to fumigate the factories, but also for sanitization for our members when they come into the factories. And what you see on the slide is the deep cleaning chemicals that we bought that amounted to 4,000, and for all other factories as outlined, in total, we spent in the region of 101,000 because of the big space of the factories that we had to fumigate. If we can move to the next slide, again, you'll see the other things that we had to buy were the thermostat that were used for factory workers when they come in, because we had to comply with the return to work policy that we have developed jointly with the department. We didn't go a separate route because we felt that we needed that capacity. We didn't have additional capacity to
develop separate documents on our own. So the staff of the SEE participated in all committees of the department, employee health and wellness, and whatever was adopted there, because we used it at SEE, at UIF compensation fund, and so on. That's what we do. Now, what I did not include there, Chairperson, was a separate issue, and we can do that at a later stage, because we at SEE looked at PPE from different angles. On one hand, honorable members will know that we produced a lot of stock that we wanted to sell to government, and we do have, for instance, an indication of the number of presentations that we went and made in different government departments in provinces and so on, indicating the kind of stock that we have. We also have information indicating, for instance, the stocks that we have in our different factories that could have been bought and used by different government departments. We also have information indicating the provinces that eventually bought from us, including the prices that we charged, because those prices were related by Treasury. So if the brief was extended, and that information can be readily forwarded to members, because it's there within the next 15 minutes or so. But for the purposes of this presentation, we concentrated mainly on the things that we bought. Things like masks and others, we didn't have to buy from outside because we manufactured for ourselves, and we also sold those same to the department, productivity, SA, and some other organizations, including individuals who came to the factories. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you. The last one?
The last one is the CCMA, Chairperson.
Thank you.
To the Deputy Minister, the Chairperson, and the honorable members, and the DG. I will. There's just one. Okay, the slides are coming up. I thought Utando could share, but CFO can just put the slides on the screen, because my computer again is asking me for permission to do so. There we go. Chairperson, this pandemic to the CCMA, it presented a very unique and interesting scenario, and as a result of which the processes of preparation in all aspects started before the lockdown, and to a large degree because of the nature of the work that we do. There's just a few points, because we did not want to contaminate the slides and adding too much information, but there's just a few points of interesting context which we want to present to you for purposes of this presentation. Firstly, I can confirm to you, Chairperson, that the systems and processes of the CCMA, I'll touch on that.
Please note, and members note, that at the beginning of this pandemic, and immediately just before the lockdown, the steps that we have taken in order to prepare for that and to regulate that, we've established important structures inside the organization. And when I'm talking about the structures, we're talking about structures that regulate and manages more than 24 offices of the CCMA. That's number one. And number two, in order to make sure that the first and the last line of defense is in order, we have also established what we call the CCC, the CCMA Command Center, or the CCMA COVID Center. And that COVID Center is composed of the executive of the CCMA, the governing body of the CCMA as a whole, and also the chairpersons of the committees of the CCMA, including the audit and risk, the human resource, including the accreditation, which deals with the bargaining councils, and most importantly, also the governance, ethics committee and compliance. Those structures, therefore, form part of that important structure of the CCMA, in order to ensure also that our systems are in compliance, that the decisions we make are in line with the prescripts as we have it from the regulations issued in terms of the disaster management and also the disaster management itself. We had ensured also that we establish a steering committee, which is below the command center, that deals with the day-to-day, every week issues as they arise in the entire structure of the CCMA. The governing body of the CCMA has taken important resolutions that gave the command center certain powers to make certain decisions relating to COVID-19. This delegation, it did in terms of Section 125 of the Labor Relations Act, read together with the Public Finance Management Act. In addition to that, Chairperson, I can confirm to the members that the functions, the procurement in particular, that is done at the CCMA, the entire procurement process is audited by our internal audit to make sure that as we take decisions, we also try to close down the opportunistic elements that may find their way in the decisions that we make, especially the emergency route that was created by the National Treasury. And of great importance, we also issued a number of directives which are not part of the presentation. We will share if need be. But all of these are submitted to the department as and when they're required. We are reporting daily, we're reporting weekly, we're reporting monthly of all activities that we do as the CCMA, not just about procurement, but also the rate of infections that we've encountered with 2 members that have passed away as a result of COVID. And of course, our governance and strategy, our governance committee has played an important role because we are of the view that procurement under these circumstances has serious governance questions. So we have to make sure that what we do, it is done in accordance with that. We've issued very comprehensive reports on compliance and risk from all angles, which we've made available to the department also. And please note, Chairperson, also that the service of the CCMA before and during the lockdown, we had said for many hours, many hours every day, in order for us to create alternative platforms for us to operate. But we have been very clear that whatever we do and however we do it, that we do not sacrifice life, because life is primary versus service. And our staff, in terms of the anxiety and all of that, has been quite a big factor. The fear of infection at all our offices, our stakeholders, including our internal unions, commissioners have raised significant concerns about us to act. Hence, you've seen that we have locked down our offices and we have closed the walk-ins that come to offices. We've reopened on the 18th of May. We have shut down again because the rate of infection was increasing. And the unfortunate thing, just the last 2 points on the introductory part, our offices, Chairperson, had a very unfortunate circumstance where we had people who broke into our offices during the lockdown. And when they break into our offices, they stole our equipments, our computers, and a number of stealable things that they took. But the greatest fear, which has caused us to then up the security during lockdown, which is one or two of those procurements that we did, was because when people break into our offices and steal the things that they stole, we do not know the COVID status of the people who broke into our offices. As a result of that, every time there's a break-in, we will then up the security, we will then disinfect the office and do all of that. And lastly, on that point, Chairperson, we have been very present in the media, myself as a leader, into the Facebooks, into the SABCs, particularly on the directives that we issue, how people should approach our offices, what the do's and don'ts, all the PP and the regulations issues we've done quite significantly on all platforms that we've done. And we have not paid any monies to any media for all the platforms that we've made. It was all done free of charge. In the main of them, we have been approached, particularly to talk about the Section 189 or the large-scale dismissals that we have experienced during the process of the lockdown. And as a result of that, Chairperson, I will then proceed. If you look at that slide, you will note that the broad categories of our activities are outlined there, which are the measures that we had to put in place, not only to prevent the spread, but also to ensure that we track and trace those that are infected, and then we are able to deal with that as and when it happens. So I will not spend time on much on this one because the whole focus is on the procurement. If we can move to the next slide, Kidibon. Just as a note, Chairperson, which necessitates the actions that we take, as at the 31st of August 2020, you will note that we've had a total number of 2 deaths that we've had, despite all the measures that we've put in place, but these things happen. And also you'll see that Gauteng is leading in terms of the total number of cases that we've had, followed by the Western Cape, which is sitting at 16 and at 19, and then Gauteng sitting at 41 and followed by the Eastern Cape. So if we can move to the next slide. In the next slide, Kedibone, the next slide, Chairperson, is where, this is slide number 4. Can we move to slide number 4, Kedibone? This is where the procurement is sitting of the CCMA. I'm not sure what's happening, it's not moving. The next slide, Chairperson, I'll just talk to it while Kidibone is trying to move into the next slide. On top of the list, you will see that one of the biggest cost factors, which will continue for some time for us and for all departments, in my view, is the one that deals with the office disinfection or the disinfecting of the offices. We were required, Chairperson, to disinfect our offices before we continue, because this was a requirement, not only in terms of the regulations, but also from all stakeholders, because we're dealing with the public in order to protect our own staff and also to protect the users who come to our office. I can't see the presentation now on the screen. I can't see the presentation on the screen. I don't know if I should continue, Chairperson, because she's trying to reload the presentation. It's just 1 or 2 slides that I need to talk to, because the members have the slides. Can I talk to them? Because the members are there. I can just direct which slide number it is. Not to be delayed.
No, I don't know. Sorry, I don't know what may be the problem, because remember, some of the members are using the same gadgets as they which they have received presentation. But if members are fine, if they are able to go to their okay. I think you are.
Welile Dwengu is supposed to, yes. Yeah, he comes.
Okay, there we are. We are back, Chairperson. We're back. You'll see, Chairperson, you know the item number 1. It's a very variable one because what we do, and we do this without fail, and you will see also that's the biggest cost in the list. We had to do disinfection immediately before the lockdown, and continue to do disinfection during all levels of the lockdown, even up to today. What normally happens is that if there is an infected person, either it's a staff member or it is the user, what we do, we make an evaluation on if a person came just at the reception to deliver something and they are infected. So we just deal with reception. We don't close down the entire office. But if it's a staff member that has been in a different office and also interacted with different members of our office, we shut down the entire office. And every time there's a shutdown, there always has to be a disinfection. And that must be done in order to prevent the continuation of the infection. So that's why you see in all our offices all over the country, that's the cost that is the variable one, and that's the biggest one in all cases before, during, and now. Like in this week, for example, Bloemfontein, the head of the region there, and 2 members of staff are infected. And we had to shut down the office and disinfect again. So, and it was Bulukwane last week or earlier this week. So we have a number of those. So we've got a service provider that does that continuously to make sure that we deal with that. And also in terms of the gloves, okay, that's an ordinary one. In the main, we're using our sanitizers. Our masks, we try to use the washable one or the reusable ones in order to contain the cost. So we've done so. So that is. I spoke about the additional security and what happened with that one. They're also doing the disinfecting, not only to protecting the offices that are broken into, and also in terms of the cleaning services and our biometric access points, the temperature scanners, and etc. The CFO will elaborate on the details of that because they deal with that. If we move to the, if you look at that slide, Chairperson, in total, actually, what you're looking at, it is we spent almost 8.5 million, both from the previous budget, because this money was not budgeted for. We could not get any additional funding. I think the department has explained that. We could not get any additional funding, so we had to reprioritize on what we have in order to procure on what we have. So that's what we've done. And then we followed the process to the T in terms of the procurement of that. So that is the amount that is there as at the 30th of August 2020. If we move to the next slide. What then happened, Chairperson, the CCMA is quite unique in terms of the structure and how we operate, because we operate on both full-time and part-time commissioners. The part-time commissioners, in terms of their status, they are not employees of the CCMA. So when the lockdown happened, they were hardest hit in terms of resources to come even to do cases at the CCMA, because they could not do work and they could not be paid. One of the difficult decisions that we had to deal with was that while we are in lockdown, full-time commissioners, because we've got both part-time and full-time commissioners, the full-time commissioners, whether they rendered service or not during lockdown, they were guaranteed to be paid a salary. But it was not the same with the part-time commissioners. So we received a lot of grievances and formation of organizations. They even approached the office of the minister, they approached the department and seeking assistance because they were not allowed also to participate in the TERS scheme because of who they are. I'm not sure why. We never got involved into discussing those nitty-gritties. So they had nowhere to go in terms of the salary and also the payment. So we had to find a contracting process where they are obligated not only to receive that pay forward for the commissioners, but to repay it. Because it's not payment that is unrepayable. It's almost like a money borrowed. So we then took the matter to audit. We took the matter to legal for ensuring that everything is in order in terms of PFMA, in terms of risk and governance. And then we took it to the command center for ensuring that all is well in assisting our commissioners, because they can't be assisted anywhere else, even though money is money to be paid back. But then we agreed that it will be contracted, and then because they're already on our roll, they're already doing cases, and we're able to get the money quickly without hassle. So we did that. Each and everyone who received assistance, they were contracted to pay the money back. And the total amount of 6.2 million was paid to them. And then we have already, and this is to be recovered over a period of 6 months. And the recovery process has already started. And as at the 30th of August, we have recovered 2.6 million from our commissioners, and they are continuing to do cases. And they're still in a very dire, very bad financial position because of the reduction of activity because of the lockdown. And of course, they followed what the president said, that service providers must be assisted during the lockdown because the circumstance is not brought by them, it is because of the pandemic. So we had thought that we can, to this extent, that we could do that because the CCMA and the fund or the state is losing no money because the money is being paid back. So the amount by the end of 6 months, we would have recovered back the whole amount. As you can see, we're now sitting at 2.6 and 3.6 is outstanding for the remainder of the financial year to make sure that the money is paid fully. So we have no complications and difficulties in that regard. And so this one is quite healthy from compliance point of view and the recovery of the money. So there are no issues to raise there. If we're to move, I'm only raising this, Chairperson, as the governing body and as the CCMA, not because we're required to, but we thought that out of transparency on issues that is affected by COVID-19, we must talk about it. But it's not an expenditure as such, it's money that is actually retained in the organization. So, but for transparency purposes and also for accountability, we thought it is important that to be aware that as the CCMA, how we have gone and how far we've gone to assist our commissioners, who, by the way, the part-time commissioners of the CCMA, they constitute the work that is allocated to them is the 60% part of what we do. So they are actually running the CCMA in terms of the cases that we dealt with throughout, not just during the COVID. So it is one of the rationales why the command center then felt it is the right thing to do, having, of course, regard to all compliances. And therefore, we are satisfied that this was a good decision. They're still asking to be assisted further because we've shut down walk-ins now because of the rate of infection that was increasing and also anticipating the second wave. So now we are constrained, but that's how far we can take it. And now they are also threatening us to go to the minister to force us to pay, to give them more assistance. But we can only do as far as we can in helping in the spirit of what the president said also, because that's the statement they're using to make sure that we pay, assist them further in there. If you move to the next slide. That's the end of the presentation.
Thank you.
Chairperson, in closing, Chairperson, we have submitted a comprehensive list. We do this ordinarily, not because of this meeting, the full list of who we are using and for what and what is being paid. So in the ordinary course of us accounting to the department and treasury, we have given that full list and we will continue to do so to make sure that we're transparent and we're doing things compliantly in order to make sure that we continue to deliver the service. Because for us, the work never stopped. All we did was to switch into the alternative digital platforms, even though the volumes are not the same, but we continue to do so so that we can continue to deliver service, particularly when you're dealing with the large-scale dismissals that are gripping the country. So that's our short presentation, Chairperson.
Thank you. Thank you, honorable members. I think that was the last presentation. Any comments, questions?
Yes, Chair. Mkondo.
Honorable Mkondo. Who else? Right, by the looks, it's only you, Honorable Mkondo. You may continue.
Thanks, Chair, for this opportunity. Let me welcome the presentations by the entities. I have a general question, Chair, to all the entities and maybe including the department itself. The SEE presentation said they procured or they got masks from their SEEs. And then the question is, because from level 5 to 11.
Sorry, Honorable Mkondo. CCMA Director, can you please mute?
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Morojani, can you please mute? You may continue, Honorable Mkondo. Sorry for that.
Okay, thanks, Chair. From level 5 to level 3, when activities were officially opened by the President of the country, it was almost 2 months. Why did the other entities not preferred to procure specifically masks from the SEEs and procure them somewhere else? Don't they think that maybe that will be, first of all, capacity enhancement to the SEEs and also better value for money? And NEDLAC talked about the legal services that they outsourced. Chair, was this not a duplication of what comprises the National Command Council headed by the President? I'm just imagining that they do have legal services in that Command Council. So if we have an entity that outsourced legal services, I really would love to know as to, was that not a duplication of what is happening in the National COVID-19 Command Council? The compensation fund, Uvuyo talked about the mobile devices that costed a lot of money. Can, in our next meeting, be provided with information as to how many officials and in which provinces, even in the HQ, benefited from those devices, the 3Gs and the mobile devices, so that we can be able to establish whether there was value for money, there was no overcharging during these procurement activities. Chair, where did these all funds come from? Did the entities or the department made environments or deviations, or are the funds coming from the National Treasury? Thanks very much, Chair.
I didn't want to, Honorable Mkondo, I didn't want to disturb you, but as we are the decorum of the committee, we call everybody by, as I will say to you, Honorable Mkondo. So if we call the staff, it's either we say Commissioner, you said Vuyo, so at least you should say either Commissioner of Compensation Fund or Mr. Mafata, so that we don't.
I'm very much sorry, Chair. That won't happen again. It's just that I did not record them accordingly. Next time I will do as you advise. Thank you.
Apology accepted, Honorable Member. Can we then get the response, DG? Can we get the responses from those questions? But before that, can I check if is there any member who want to ask something or comment? After Honorable Mkonto. Okay. By the looks, is there somebody who's talking? All right. Dichi, can you respond?
Thank you, Chair. I'll respond just to two questions. I'll ask the entities to respond to the first question: why did they not procure from the SCE? I'll start with the last question: where did the funds come from? The funds came from the budget of the department and the entities. When we went into lockdown, it was clear that a number of projects that entities and the department were supposed to have done or were planned to be done were not going to happen, and also the items for traveling and subsistence was an item that was not going to be utilized. So we were able to utilize the budget that was allocated for that, redirect it to the procurement of personal protective equipment, and that's how we were able to cope, and that's how we're still doing it now, Chairperson. The second point I want to respond to is a question around NEDLEC, whether this was not a duplication of the National Coronavirus Command Center responsibility. It wasn't, Chair. The NEDLEC is entrusted with the responsibility to look at different pieces of legislation, especially those that have an are likely to have economic impact. Now, from time to time, social partners would then request that a legal opinion be sourced from legal experts, and it is in those circumstances that a legal opinion would then be sourced from people like Chittle and Professor Paul Benjamin and others who are experts in the field of labor law. Especially in this case, we were looking at the different directives that the department issued, the directive on UIF, on the COVID TERS-19, the directive on the compensation, and the directive on occupational health and safety. So those were the services that they were engaged in. They were not required for litigation purposes, but only for them to provide expert opinion and advice, and also drafting the assisting with drafting the different directives. We'll provide the information that the honourable member has requested, Chairperson, with regards to the beneficiaries of the mobile devices that were procured by the compensation fund. We'll do so. I'll ask the entities to respond to question one. Why did they not procure from the SCE factors? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. A straight to the point response for that question. Any entity that wants to be the taker first?
Chairperson, if I may, from the UIF.
Yes.
Acting Commissioner.
Yes.
Thank you. Chairperson, you will see in our breakdown that we did, in fact, buy face masks from SEE, albeit at the end of the reporting period. The first two procurements happened, and you know, in the beginning, I think everyone will recall that we were all sort of shocked, surprised, and so on, and we had to do procurement at a great speed. So that is why the bulk of the procurement in the beginning of the lockdown period was done with private suppliers, but at the end, the fund has moved and procured cloth face masks from SEE. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Which one is what? CCMA? Do you have a response from, do you have a CCMA? Compensation Fund?
Thank you, Chair. I think similar to the UIF, Chair. So our procurement of especially the cloth masks started early in May, just before SEE could start with the bulk manufacturing of the masks. So we intend that when we refresh the masks, we will then procure from SEE.
Okay, thank you. Productivity SA?
Thank you, Chairperson. Productivity SA, subsequent to April, we purchased all our masks from SEE. So we didn't see any need to purchase from anywhere else. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who has not responded yet? Nedlek?
Afternoon, Chair. I think, Chair, Jonas Shai speaking. I think just in line with what the colleagues from the different entities have said, Chair, we really were in a rather unorganized position when we started with the procurement. At subsequent procurements, Chair, we do commit to following the SCE. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. CCMA?
Chairperson Gidiboni from CCMA, also in line with the comments that the other colleagues have made, I think the initial procurement from our side, specifically for the cloth masks, was driven by the instructions that were issued by the National Treasury. So all the suppliers that we had, it was based on the list that the National Treasury had published, directing us where to procure the cloth masks from. In future, we will endeavor to procure from SEE should we still have that particular need.
Okay, thank you very much. I think all the questions has been responded to. Can I check if the DM is around before we close?
I'm around, Honorable Chairperson. I was kicked out and I've been trying to come back and it took so long. I had to change the gadget. So I've missed a lot of presentations and questions that had been raised. But I think the DG managed to respond to most, and the commissioners managed to respond to most of the questions as raised. And if there might have been any outstanding clarifications or further information that is needed by the committee, I think we are committing ourselves that it can be sent in writing back to the chairperson and the committee. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, DG. I think, honorable members, we have had this meeting with maybe should I say, an unusual meeting necessitated by the situation that we are under in terms of the new normal and in terms of the proclamations that have been signed in by the president on issues of COVID in as far as audit is concerned. So things will be done differently, not because of anything else, but to ensure that we are at the same level. So the reason that we have then requested the auditors to come, I just want to make it clear to members, the reason that we have requested the auditors to come and take us through on this matter is because of that. Just for information, if it was a normal audit, the auditors, they know what is the process to follow. And that it didn't, and the office of the chair didn't question that, because we understand that this is a unique process. We are going to go through an audit process and a procedures that are understood by members. But members must be of the understanding that we are in this normal situation. We are still going to call the auditors, and they take us through the process as they would understand. The only thing, the reason that the meeting was called was for members to be abreast, was for members to understand as the processes are unfolding. So that's why one said these processes are processes, it's work in progress. We will then still get the full report as the process is unfolding. Same applies to the department. The department is still going to come. The department is still going to respond on the processes, on the issues that are outlined by the department, by the Office of the Auditor-General. Can I just said it was a process that was to empower us. And I don't think we need to, as the Office of the Chair, to feel as if we have done something wrong. We may have done something which is unusual, but because of the environment and the processes that are unfolding in front of our eyes, the chair didn't want members to be informed by the media. The office felt that it is important that members must, as we are going on a recess, we must, as will be informed by the media, will be informed, we will see what is unfolding, having been at least being exposed to what is then happening. So all the questions and the comments, in my understanding as the chair, those are the questions and comments on what has been presented for us to be empowered. The last remark, I think I need to commend the member of the EFF, Honorable Mkondo, for asking the question around the SEE DG. I think she is then beginning to say charity must begin at home. And as you will then be coming back again, I think we'll then have to look into that. And thank you very much, Honorable Mkondo, by putting that question, so that, and as much as we want all departments to source services from the SEE, that must be led by the department itself. And that question, in my view, as the chair, is a question that is very profound. And we will watch the space. Having said that, members, I think I want to thank you very much for availing yourselves in the committee. I just want to go to what the AG said, that the audit they conducted where the audit in some areas where eagles there. And I think DM and the DG, there are going to be times where, as the committee, we will go where eagles there. With that, enjoy your constituents period, members. We will meet again sometime towards the end or in the middle of October. We must go through all the information that we are having in front of us, including the legislation that is in front of us. So, which is the COIDA amendment. The other one is still with the department. The department has circulated and the ministry for comments, and we will then deal with that when it comes in front of the department, in front of the committee. For now, it is only the amendment on COIDA bill. Thank you very much, members. Until we meet again, take care, stay safe. We are still under lockdown, but I say, and I want to commend the members of the portfolio committee who were in the sitting. The four, I think there were the four of them. Thank you very much for representing us. Until we meet again, enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Bye.